On our anniversary, my husband took me to a romantic dinner, but as I took a sip of my wine, he whispered, "It's laced. Say your goodbyes." Little did he know I had switched the glasses, and when he collapsed, he looked at me in horror as I said, "You deceived me in love, now see the end." "Goodbye, my dear." The wine glass trembled in my hand, not from fear but anticipation. Across the candlelit table, Cole raised his own glass, oblivious to the fact that our 5th anniversary dinner would be his last. To us, he smiled, the same smile that once made me fall in love, now making my stomach turn. If only he knew I had switched our glasses moments before. Before we dive into Ruby and Cole's tale of love and betrayal, I want to thank you for joining this amazing journey. If you enjoy such gripping narratives, hit that subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and ensures you never miss an amazing story. Let's dive in. 5 years. It's remarkable how time can transform everything: love, trust, and even a person's soul. I remember the day we met as if it were yesterday, that crisp autumn morning at Thornfield Books. Both of us reaching for the same worn copy of Rebecca, our fingers brushing against the aged spine. His storm-gray eyes crinkled at the corners when he insisted I take it. "A beautiful book for a beautiful lady," he'd said, and I'd fallen for both his charm and those perfectly timed words. Our courtship was like a dance, each step precisely calculated, though I didn't know it then. Weekend getaways to hidden bed and breakfasts, surprise picnics in secluded meadows, intimate dinners at exclusive restaurants. Cole knew exactly how to make a girl feel special. Special enough to miss the subtle signs, the careful way he studied my family's wealth, the calculating gleam behind his tender gazes. The proposal came on a moonlit beach in Maine, waves crashing against rocky shores as he knelt in the sand. The ring was a family heirloom, he claimed, his grandmother's. I would later learn it belonged to someone else entirely, but that night, it sparkled with nothing but promise. Our wedding was the talk of the season. The historic Rose Garden Manor draped in white roses and twinkling lights, string quartets playing as we exchanged vows beneath a flower-laden arch. I can still picture Cole's face as he slipped the wedding band onto my finger, his touch gentle, his words honey-sweet. Forever, he'd promised. Another perfectly crafted lie. The first year was bliss, or what I thought was bliss. Cole was the perfect husband, attentive and thoughtful. He brought me coffee every morning, remembered every anniversary, monthly then yearly, and surprised me with thoughtful gifts. My friends envied our relationship, called us the perfect couple. If they only knew how perfect he was at deception. Looking at him now, in the soft glow of Lou Blanc's finest table, I see the masterful performance for what it is. The way he adjusts his tie, a nervous tell I've learned to read. The slight tremor in his hand as he reaches for his water glass. He's anxious tonight, though he hides it well. 5 years of studying your target teaches you their every nuance. "You look beautiful tonight," he says, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that once melted my heart. Now I hear the undertones, the careful manipulation in each syllable. "My black dress was his suggestion. It matches your pearl necklace perfectly, darling." The pearls were a gift from him last month, probably meant to be my final piece of jewelry. I take another sip of wine, watching him over the rim of my glass. The vintage is exceptional. A bottle we've been saving since our wedding day. Cole insisted we open it tonight, his own special touch for what he planned to be my final evening. The irony isn't lost on me. "Remember our first date?" he asks, swirling the dark liquid in his glass. Of course I remember. The same restaurant, the same table even. He'd ordered champagne then too, though I'd barely touched it, too nervous and excited by his attention. "You barely ate a thing," he chuckles, reaching across to touch my hand. "You were so shy." I allow his fingers to entwine with mine, forcing myself to smile. "You made me nervous," I reply, the words true despite everything. "You were so sophisticated, so worldly. I couldn't believe you were interested in me. How could I not be?" His thumb traces circles on my palm, a gesture that used to send shivers down my spine. "You were everything I was looking for." As I was young, wealthy, trusting, the perfect target. But he didn't count on one thing. Love can turn to ice when betrayed, and ice can preserve a heart's resolve far longer than passion ever could. The waiter approaches with our appetizers, breaking our intimate moment. As Cole withdraws his hand to make room for the plates, I catch him glancing at his watch, checking the time, waiting for his plan to unfold. Little does he know the timer he's watching is counting down to his own finale. I raise my glass again, offering him a smile that mirrors his own practiced perfection. To 5 unforgettable years, I toast, watching as he lifts his glass to meet mine. The crystal chimes, a bell-like sound that rings with finality. Yes, unforgettable indeed. The truth began unraveling 3 months ago on a rain-soaked Tuesday afternoon. Cole had left for another business trip, his 4th that month. I was organizing his office, something he usually discouraged, when I noticed something odd about the antique desk he'd brought from his family estate. The bottom drawer had a false back. My fingers trembled as I pressed the hidden catch, years of blind trust crumbling with each gentle click of the mechanism. Inside lay a burgundy leather folder, its contents threatening to spill out like whispered confessions. Bank statements, property deeds, insurance policies. But it was the photographs that stopped my heart. 3 women, all bearing a striking resemblance to me. Wealthy, trusting, beautiful. Charlotte in Boston, Elizabeth in Seattle, Marie in Chicago. Each smiling beside Cole in wedding photos, each with a different last name he'd used. Each vanished within 2 years of their marriages, leaving their fortunes to their devoted husband. The room spun as pieces clicked into place. His insistence on joint accounts. The subtle pressure to change my will. The vitamin supplements he'd started adding to my evening tea. My mysterious fatigue these past weeks. The weight of truth crushed against my chest as I sank into his leather chair. Rain drumming against the windows like nature's warning bells. That night I smiled through dinner, laughed at his phone call and pretended everything was normal. Inside, ice crystallized around my heart, preserving the betrayal like a fossil in amber. I spent hours studying the documents, memorizing accounts and tracking patterns. Cole Scott was a ghost, a phantom who slipped from city to city, leaving broken dreams and empty bank accounts in his wake. The next morning I began my own careful dance. I hired a private investigator under the guise of researching a potential business partner. Sandra Pierce was thorough, discreet and most importantly female. Someone Cole would never suspect. Within weeks she uncovered more than I could have imagined. His business trips were carefully orchestrated meetings with lawyers and bankers. Each of his previous wives had shown similar symptoms before their disappearances. Fatigue, dizziness, confusion. Their cases remained open, evidence inconclusive, while their joint accounts were drained by their grieving widower. I watched him more carefully then, noting every detail with new eyes. The way he tested my memory with casual questions about our early dates. How he documented my declining health in careful emails to my doctor. The concerned calls to my family about my forgetfulness. He was building his narrative, laying groundwork for my eventual disappearance. The most chilling discovery came hidden in his personal laptop. The one he thought I couldn't access. A detailed timeline, clinical in its precision. My accident was scheduled for our anniversary dinner. Cole always did appreciate symbolism. Each night, I pretended to drink his special tea, disposing of it when he wasn't looking. I started taking small doses of what I found in his private safe, building immunity while maintaining the appearance of deteriorating health. He watched me with concern that I now recognized as calculation, each sympathetic touch a measurement of his progress. "You should rest, darling," he'd say, tucking me into bed like a child. "You're looking rather pale." His fingers would brush my cheek, checking my temperature, assessing his timeline. I'd smile weakly, playing my part in his production while fury burned beneath my skin. During the day I made my own preparations. Private accounts established under my grandmother's maiden name. Evidence carefully copied and distributed to secure locations. A detailed dossier of his activities sent to trusted friends with instructions to be opened if anything happened to me. Tonight, watching him sip his wine across our anniversary dinner table, I marvel at his composure. He truly believes he's won, that everything is proceeding according to his masterful plan. Perhaps that's why he's becoming careless, missing the slight changes in my behavior, the steel beneath my fragile smile. The waiter returns asking about our entrees. Cole orders for both of us. He always does lately, claiming to know what's best for my delicate stomach. I catch the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, the ghost of satisfaction as he plays the devoted husband. Little does he know, every sympathetic glance, every concerned touch, every manipulative gesture only strengthens my resolve. I raise my glass again, admiring how the candlelight plays across the dark liquid. To us, I whisper and watch as he drinks deeply, savoring what he believes is his moment of triumph. The game is changing, my darling husband. Your move. Revenge, like love, requires patience. After discovering Cole's true nature, I spent 6 methodical months preparing. My garden became my sanctuary, each plant carefully selected for its properties. Foxglove with its innocent purple bells, oleander's delicate blooms, lily of the valley standing pristine and pure, nature's deadliest wrapped in beauty, much like Cole's deception. I befriended Eleanor, a retired botanist who lived on the outskirts of town. For my research, I explained, showing her my carefully crafted blog about natural remedies. She was delighted to share her knowledge, never suspecting that I was more interested in her expertise about toxic plants than healing ones. We spent afternoons discussing the properties of various species, my notebook filling with precisely measured annotations. Some plants, she once said, stirring her tea, can be both medicine and poison. It's all in the dosage. Her words echoed in my mind as I carefully cultivated my garden, each plant a potential instrument in my symphony of justice. At home, I maintained our routine with meticulous care. Weekly dinner parties with friends, charity galas, romantic date nights. I played my part flawlessly. Cole would kiss my forehead, telling our guests how brave I was dealing with Mike's mysterious illness. I'd smile weakly, letting him think his plan was working perfectly. "You're so good to me," I'd whisper as he tucked me into bed, watching his eyes gleam with satisfaction. Each display of weakness was calculated, each symptom carefully staged. I built my own timeline alongside his, a deadly waltz of preparation and pretense. The hardest part wasn't the planning. It was maintaining the facade of ignorance. Listening to him talk about our future while knowing his intentions. Feeling his touch and remembering how I once craved it. Smiling at his jokes while picturing the other women who had done the same, now silent and forgotten. I spent hours in our home office when he was away, meticulously documenting everything. Bank statements, property records, insurance policies, all carefully copied and secured in various locations. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the foundation of my protection, insurance against any future investigations. My daily routine became a cover for preparation. Morning walks to regain my strength were actually meetings with my private investigator. Afternoon naps were spent studying chemical compounds and their effects. Shopping trips allowed me to set up offshore accounts and secure new identities. The most challenging aspect was building immunity. Starting with minute doses, I gradually increased my tolerance to various compounds. Some nights left me shaking and sick, but each morning I grew stronger. Cole's concerned glances at my declining health only proved that my performance was convincing. "Perhaps we should consult another specialist," he'd suggest, his voice dripping with false concern. I'd shake my head, claiming I trusted only him to take care of me. His smile would widen, pride in his own cleverness blinding him to mine. Our social circle became unwitting participants in my plan. I confided in selected friends about my anxiety, my forgetfulness, ensuring witnesses to support Cole's narrative. But I also left carefully crafted breadcrumbs, letters speaking of my happiness, videos showing my lucidity, all dated and secured with trusted allies. As our anniversary approached, I watched Cole's excitement grow. He spent hours planning the perfect evening, selecting the restaurant, choosing the wine. Each detail was orchestrated to create the perfect scene for his final act. The irony of him planning his own downfall was not lost on me. My own preparations entered their final phase. The compound I'd chosen was elegant in its simplicity, untraceable, swift, and most importantly, similar enough to natural causes that no questions would be raised. I'd tested it countless times, perfecting the dosage while building my own resistance. Tonight, watching him order our appetizers with such confidence, I almost admire his dedication to the performance. 5 years of marriage and he's never once slipped, never shown his true face. But then I remember the others, Charlotte, Elizabeth, Marie, and my resolve hardens. The waiter arrives with our wine, a vintage Cole selected weeks ago. He insists on pouring it himself, ever the perfect husband. His hands are steady as he fills our glasses, unaware that his carefully laid plans are about to unravel. I touch the small vial concealed in my evening bag, feeling its weight like a promise. To new beginnings, he says, raising his glass. If only he knew how true those words would prove to be. The oak room at Le Blanc hasn't changed in 5 years. The same crystal chandeliers cast their soft golden glow, the same rich mahogany panels line the walls, and the same intimate corner table awaits us. Table 23, where Cole first caught my eye half a decade ago. Tonight it will witness another memorable moment between us. I arrived early, claiming I wanted to freshen up. The maitre d' recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Scott, always a pleasure," he smiled, leading me to our table. Mr. Scott called ahead. "Everything has been arranged exactly as he requested." "I'm sure it has. My darling husband always was meticulous with his planning." While waiting, I surveyed the room with practiced casualness. 2 elderly couples by the windows, a young family celebrating near the entrance, and a business dinner in progress at the center table. Perfect, enough witnesses to establish the evening's normalcy, but none close enough to overhear our intimate conversation. The table setting was immaculate: white linens, polished silverware, and our special anniversary crystal glasses, the ones Cole had insisted on bringing from home. A thoughtful touch, he'd called it. The same glasses we'd used at our wedding, now destined for a different kind of celebration. Cole arrived precisely on time, his gray suit perfectly tailored, silver tie catching the light. He crossed the room with that confident stride that once made my heart race. Now I noticed the calculated nature of each movement, the practiced charm in his smile as he greeted the staff by name. "Darling, you look breathtaking," he said, kissing my cheek. His cologne, expensive, subtle, brought back memories of countless romantic evenings. I wondered if he'd worn the same scent for the others, if they'd found it as intoxicating as I once did. The sommelier approached with our pre-selected wine, a 2015 Chateau Margaux that Cole had been saving for this exact occasion. I watched him perform the ritual, presenting the bottle, cutting the foil, extracting the cork with practiced ease. Cole's eyes never left the deep red liquid as it was poured, first into his glass for approval, then mine. "Perfect," he pronounced, his voice rich with satisfaction. The sommelier departed, leaving us alone with our perfectly staged scene. I touched the small vial concealed in my clutch, its presence reassuring. Timing would be crucial. Too early might arise suspicion, too late might give him the opportunity one couldn't afford him to have. "Remember our first night here?" Cole asked, reaching across to take my hand. "You were wearing blue, nervous about using the wrong fork." His thumb traced circles on my palm, a gesture that used to make me melt. "Now look at us. 5 years of perfect moments." I smiled, letting nostalgia color my voice. "You ordered champagne even though I told you I preferred wine." Said some occasions demanded bubbles. The memory felt distant, like watching a movie of someone else's life. And I was right, wasn't I? His eyes crinkled with amusement. "Just like I'm right about this wine. A perfect vintage for a perfect evening." He lifted his glass, examining the color in the candlelight. "Everything about tonight needs to be perfect." The waiter arrived with our appetizers. Seared scallops for him, French onion soup for me. Cole had ordered for us both, naturally. "You never could resist their soup," he commented, watching me take a careful sip. His attention to detail would have been touching if I didn't know its true purpose. As we ate, I felt the weight of the evening pressing around us. Each bite, each sip, each moment of casual conversation was leading us toward an inevitable conclusion. Cole checked his watch subtly, his 3rd time since arriving. Waiting. Anticipating. The irony of his impatience almost made me smile. The main courses arrived. His favorite Wagyu steak for him, roasted chicken for me. "You should try the steak," he urged, cutting a perfect bite. "It might be your last chance to taste Chef Marcus's specialty." The double meaning in his words hung heavy in the air. I declined politely, watching him savor the meat with obvious pleasure. My own meal remained largely untouched. Expected behavior for someone in my condition. Cole's eyes flickered with satisfaction at my apparent weakness. The crystal glasses caught the candlelight as I reached for my wine, the liquid dark and promising. "My love." Soon the final act would begin, and all your perfect planning would unravel like silk threads in a storm. I raised my glass, offering him a smile that held all the secrets of the past 6 months. "To us," I whispered, "and to perfect timing." Time slowed to a crystalline crawl as Cole raised his glass to meet mine. The crystal chimed softly, a delicate death knell in the candlelit hush of Louis Blanc. His confidence radiated across the table, a familiar warmth that once meant safety but now sparked only cold satisfaction in my chest. "You've barely touched your dinner," he noted, concern painting his features. The performance was flawless. The slight furrow of his brow, the gentle tilt of his head. How many times had he practiced these expressions in the mirror? How many other women had fallen for this same display of tender worry? "I'm saving room for dessert," I replied, my voice soft and slightly tremulous. Exactly what he'd expect from his increasingly frail wife. "You always said the chocolate soufflé here was to die for." The irony of my words brought a genuine smile to my lips. Cole leaned forward, his fingers brushing mine across the white tablecloth. "Actually, darling, I have a confession to make." His voice dropped to an intimate whisper, gray eyes holding mine with hypnotic intensity. "I've taken the liberty of arranging something special for dessert. A final surprise, if you will." "How thoughtful," I murmured, watching him take another sip of wine. My pulse quickened as he drank deeper, his throat working as he swallowed. "Any moment now. You always did know how to make our anniversaries memorable." The candlelight caught the ring on his left hand, the one he claimed was a family heirloom. I wondered if it had belonged to Charlotte or Elizabeth. Perhaps Marie. Soon it would join his collection of trophies, waiting for the next unsuspecting bride. "I've been thinking about our first night here," he continued, his voice taking on a dreamy quality. "You were so innocent, so trusting. Do you remember what you said when I ordered that ridiculously expensive champagne? That some things are worth splurging on," I recalled, watching his eyes begin to lose focus. "That life is too short not to celebrate the perfect moment." He blinked slowly, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for his water glass. "You're not feeling well," I observed, mirroring his earlier concern. "Perhaps the wine is too strong?" He loosened his tie, confusion flickering across his features. "Something's not, the wine tastes." His words slurred at the edges, realization dawning too late in his clouding eyes. I leaned forward, dropping my voice to match his earlier intimate whisper. "Did you know, darling, that some plants in my garden can cause symptoms remarkably similar to a heart attack? Particularly in combination with that special supplement you've been so lovingly adding to my tea." His face drained of color, fingers clutching the edge of the table. "What did you?" The words caught in his throat as understanding crashed over him. "I found them, Cole. All of them. Charlotte. Elizabeth. Marie." I kept my voice steady, watching him struggle to maintain his composure. "Did they realize too late as well? Did they look at you with the same betrayal you're feeling right now?" He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. The other diners remained absorbed in their own celebrations, oblivious to our intimate drama. "Help," he whispered, but the word barely carried across the table. "Shoo," I soothed, patting his hand as he'd done so many times during my illness. "Don't make a scene, darling. You're just having a bad reaction to the wine. These things happen, especially with aged vintages." Sweat beaded on his forehead as he fought to remain upright. "You switched the glasses." I finished for him, allowing myself a small smile. "Oh, my love. I switched them back. You see, I've been building immunity for months. That little nightcap you prepared for me tonight? I've been taking small doses since I found the vial in your study." Horror dawned in his eyes as the room began to spin around him. I signaled the waiter. "My husband isn't feeling well," I explained, my voice trembling with perfectly practiced concern. "I think the wine might be too strong. Could you help me get him to the car?" "Of course, madam," the waiter replied, already moving to assist. "Sir, let me help you up." I watched as they guided Cole's unsteady form through the restaurant, playing the part of the worried wife to perfection. His face had taken on an ashen hue, his breathing becoming more labored with each step. "Happy anniversary, my love," I whispered as we reached the exit. "You were right. Some moments are worth splurging on." The drive home was silent except for Cole's increasingly labored breathing. I took the long route, giving us privacy for our final conversation. The city lights blurred past like dying stars, casting intermittent shadows across his ashen face. "Pull over," he managed to gasp, his perfectly styled hair now damp with sweat. "Hospital." I guided the car into a secluded overlook, our favorite spot for watching sunsets during those early, innocent days. No hospitals tonight, darling. This is between us. My voice remained steady, though my hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. Not from fear, but from 5 years of suppressed rage finally breaking free. How? He struggled with the word, his designer suit now disheveled, tie hanging loose around his neck. How long have you known? About your plan for tonight? Or about Charlotte, Elizabeth, and Marie? I turned to face him, drinking in the sight of his perfect facade crumbling. I found your secret drawer 3 months ago. The false back wasn't as clever as you thought. Though I must admit, keeping trophies from each wife was a rather poetic touch. His eyes widened in recognition. The ring. Yes, Marie's ring. The one you claimed belonged to your grandmother. I twisted it on my finger, watching it catch the moonlight. Did you tell them all that same story? Did they believe it as easily as I did? He tried to reach for the door handle, but his coordination was failing. I watched him struggle, remembering all the times I'd fought against his carefully administered poison, building my resistance in secret. The letters were a nice touch, I continued, my voice taking on an almost conversational tone. Writing to my family about my declining health, documenting my symptoms so meticulously. I particularly enjoyed the concerned emails to my doctor. You really did think of everything. Ruby, he whispered, my name a plea on his lips. We can discuss this, like you discussed it with the others? My laugh held no humor. Tell me, did they beg too? Did they try to reason with you as the poison took hold? Or did they never see it coming? His breathing became more ragged, panic fighting with the toxin in his system. I loved you. No, you loved my money, my trust, my innocence. I reached into my clutch, withdrawing the USB drive I'd prepared. Everything's here. The evidence of your previous marriages, the insurance policies, the carefully transferred funds. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate when the symptoms started? You don't understand. He gasped, fighting to maintain consciousness. I had reasons. Oh, I understand perfectly. I placed the USB drive in his jacket pocket. You're a collector, aren't you? You collect women, their fortunes, their lives. Each one carefully chosen, methodically destroyed. But you made one mistake, Cole. His head lolled against the leather seat, but his eyes remained fixed on me, terror mixing with a grudging admiration. What mistake? You taught me too well. All those lessons about patience, about planning, about paying attention to details. I brushed a strand of hair from his damp forehead, almost tenderly. I learned from the master, you could say. Police. He managed, though the word was barely audible. We'll find a tragic case of accidental wine contamination. A grieving widow who tried desperately to get her husband to the hospital, but he insisted on going home first. All those documented health issues finally coming to a head. I smiled, seeing understanding dawn in his fading eyes. You really did create the perfect cover story. You're just like me. The words came out in a whisper, his final attempt to wound. I leaned close, letting him see the truth in my eyes. No, darling. I'm better. You did this for money. I did it for justice. For Charlotte, Elizabeth, Marie. And for the woman I used to be, the one who believed in fairy tales and happy endings. His breathing grew shallower, his perfectly manicured hands clutching at nothing. I watched as the master of manipulation faced his final moments, stripped of all pretense and power. One last thing, I whispered, showing him the phone in my hand. I found your timeline. The one detailing how tonight was supposed to end. It's quite impressive, really. I just made a few small adjustments. Recognition flickered in his eyes. His own plan turned against him. The perfect symmetry of it all seemed to hit him in his final moments of consciousness. His lips moved, trying to form words, but no sound emerged. Goodbye, my love, I said softly, watching as his eyes finally closed. The police will be here soon. After all, I have to report my husband's tragic accident. The police lights painted the overlook in alternating flashes of red and blue, creating a surreal dance across Cole's still features. I stood wrapped in a shock blanket, playing my role to perfection as I recounted the evening's events through tears. He insisted on taking the scenic route home, I explained to Detective Sarah Morgan, my voice trembling. Said he wasn't feeling well after the wine, but wanted to see our favorite spot one last time. I should have taken him straight to the hospital. The detective's dark eyes studied me with quiet intensity. Mrs. Scott, you couldn't have known. The preliminary tests show a severe allergic reaction. These things can happen suddenly. She paused, jotting something in her notebook. The restaurant will be investigated, of course. I nodded numbly, watching the coroner's team work with professional efficiency. The USB drive remained secure in Cole's jacket pocket, a time bomb of evidence waiting to be discovered. His phone, with its damning timeline, sat in his other pocket. All the pieces laid out perfectly, waiting to tell their story. The next few days passed in a blur of formal statements and funeral arrangements. Cole's family arrived from out of town, people I'd never met during our marriage, all claiming close relationships that existed only in conversation. They spoke of him in glowing terms, sharing stories that rang hollow against the truth I knew. He was always so generous, his alleged cousin remarked at the wake. Remember that charity gala last spring? The woman's eyes were dry despite her mournful tone. I wondered how much she'd been paid to attend, to flesh out his manufactured background. The investigation proceeded exactly as I'd anticipated. The restaurant's wine supplier faced scrutiny. The bottle was tested, revealing traces of contamination. My documented history of serving on the hospital board ensured my medical knowledge was never questioned. Who would suspect a philanthropist who dedicated her time to healthcare causes? A week after the funeral, Detective Morgan requested another meeting. The familiar weight of the shock blanket was replaced by the subtle armor of a black designer suit as I sat across from her in the station. Mrs. Scott, she began, spreading photographs across her desk. We found some interesting items in your husband's possession. The USB drive and phone lay between us like bridge pieces in our delicate game. I don't understand, I whispered, allowing confusion to color my voice. Are those Cole's? She nodded, her expression carefully neutral. They contain some disturbing information about previous marriages, insurance policies, financial transactions. Her eyes met mine. Did you know your husband had been married before? The shock that crossed my face was genuine, not from the revelation, but from the artistry of watching my plan unfold. That's impossible. Cole told me I was his only. I let my voice break, reaching for the tissue box on her desk. We've confirmed at least 3 previous marriages. All to wealthy women. All ending in suspicious circumstances. She pushed a document toward me. And we found this timeline on his phone. It appears he was planning something. I scanned the document I knew by heart, allowing horror to dawn gradually on my features. These dates, these notes about my symptoms. My hands began to shake. Detective, are you saying? We believe your husband was planning to end your life that night. The wine glass from the restaurant showed traces of a sophisticated poison. She leaned forward, her voice gentling. The same compound was found in a vial in his study. Mrs. Scott. Ruby, it appears you weren't just a witness to a tragic accident. You were an intended victim who survived. The irony of her words almost made me smile. Instead, I collapsed into carefully crafted sobs, playing the role of a shattered widow discovering her husband's true nature. Detective Morgan rounded the desk to comfort me, her hand warm on my shoulder. We'll need to investigate further, she continued, but I want you to know you're safe now. Whatever he planned, it ended that night. I looked up at her through tears, seeing not suspicion but sympathy in her eyes. All those other women, I whispered. Could I have helped them if I'd known? This isn't your fault, she assured me. Cole Scott was a skilled manipulator. The evidence suggests he'd been perfecting his technique for years. You couldn't have known. But I did know, I thought as she continued explaining the investigation's next steps. I knew everything, planned everything, executed everything. The perfect ending to Cole's perfect plan. Just not the ending he'd envisioned. As I left the police station, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Somewhere, perhaps Charlotte, Elizabeth, and Marie could finally rest. Their stories would be told, their cases reopened, their families given closure. And I would emerge as the lucky one, the survivor who unknowingly helped expose a predator's web of deception. 6 months later, I stood on my balcony in Antibes, watching the Mediterranean glitter under the setting sun. The French Riviera had become my sanctuary, far from the whispers and sympathetic glances that followed me back home. Here I was simply the wealthy American widow who kept to herself, and that suited me perfectly. The investigation had concluded exactly as I'd orchestrated. Cole's victims' families received closure, their cases resolved with his posthumous confession found in a scheduled email, my final gift to them. His extensive network of fake relatives crumbled under police scrutiny, revealing the elaborate facade he'd built over years. I sipped my evening wine, a local rose that tasted nothing like the vintage from that final night. My garden here contained only flowers. No herbs, no mysterious plants. Some tools once used should be retired permanently. The sunset reminded me of Detective Morgan's last visit, 2 months after Cole's death. She'd brought final paperwork and unexpected news. There were others, she'd said, sliding photographs across my kitchen table. We found evidence of 2 more marriages, earlier ones. The pattern wasn't as refined then. He was learning. I'd studied the faces of these unknown women, these first drafts of Cole's perfected scheme, and felt a strange kinship with them. We were all characters in his performance, though I'd managed to rewrite the ending. A gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine from my balcony garden, mingling with the salt air. My phone buzzed with a message from Charlotte's sister. We'd formed an unlikely friendship, survivors and witnesses to Cole's legacy. The support group we'd created for his victims' families had become a source of healing for many, including myself. The sound of approaching footsteps drew my attention. Madame Scott, Henri, my favorite waiter from the hotel's restaurant, appeared with fresh towels. Will you be dining in this evening? I turned, studying his features in the fading light. Handsome, charming, with that same careful attention to detail I'd learned to recognize. Actually, Henri, I was thinking of trying that new bistro you recommended. Would you care to join me when your shift ends? His smile brightened. It would be my pleasure, madam. As he left, I caught my reflection in the balcony doors, older now, wiser, but still capable of attracting attention. Henri had been leaving subtle hints for weeks, each interaction carefully crafted to seem spontaneous. His background story had inconsistencies I'd noticed immediately, like echoes of a song I knew by heart. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email from my private investigator. The preliminary report on Henri lay waiting to be read, promising to reveal whether my suspicions were paranoia or instinct. I picked up the small notebook where I'd been documenting our interactions, noting patterns and discrepancies. The familiar practice felt both comforting and disturbing. Had Cole kept similar notes? Had his meticulous planning become a part of me? The sky deepened to purple, stars beginning to emerge over the Mediterranean. I thought of Cole's last words, "You're just like me," and wondered if he'd been more right than he knew. The skills I'd learned, the patience I'd developed, the attention to detail that had saved my life. They were his teachings, his legacy. Opening my laptop, I began my own research into Henri's past. Social media profiles that seemed too perfectly curated. Employment history with convenient gaps. A pattern of wealthy women left behind in different coastal towns. My lips curved into a smile as I closed the laptop. Perhaps Cole had taught me too well, or perhaps he'd simply awakened something that had always been there. The thrill of unraveling deception, of seeing through carefully constructed facades. It was intoxicating. I retrieved my evening bag, checking my reflection one final time before heading to dinner. The black dress hugged my curves, the pearls at my throat catching the last rays of sunlight. In my clutch, alongside my lipstick and phone, rested a small notebook and a vial of clear liquid, tools of a trade I thought I'd left behind. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. As I stepped inside, I caught my reflection in its mirrored walls. The woman who stared back was neither victim nor villain, but something in between. A survivor who'd learned to play the game better than her teacher. "Good evening, Madam Scott," the elevator attendant nodded. "Good evening," I replied, my smile holding secrets of its own. "I have a feeling tonight will be the beginning of something interesting." The elevator doors closed, carrying me down to where Henri waited, unaware that he'd chosen the wrong widow for his next performance. Some lessons once learned become impossible to unlearn. And some dances are more intriguing when both partners know the steps. The game, it seemed, was not yet over. It had merely evolved, and so had I. My ex-husband thought I was infertile, left me 13 years ago. In Tokyo, he smirked. "Still single, right? My son's a genius like me." I smiled. "Meet my son." He went pale. The boy was his spitting image. I'd raised his son alone. His smirk faded into regret. I never thought I'd be pregnant and divorced in the same month. I whispered to my reflection in the bathroom mirror, holding the positive pregnancy test with trembling hands. 8 weeks earlier, Maxwell had stood in our kitchen, his posture stiff and formal as if addressing a business associate rather than his wife of 7 years. "Claire, I want a divorce." The words hit like physical blows. "I've been patient, but I need children. A family. Something you can't give me." The memory of that moment still burned. I'd stood frozen, still wearing the apron from the dinner I was preparing. A special meal to discuss one last round of fertility treatments I'd researched. "But Maxwell, we have options," the doctor said. "I've met someone else." His voice was eerily calm. "She's younger. The odds are better." Before we begin Claire's journey, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being here. If you're drawn to stories about finding strength in life's most devastating moments, like when Claire's husband walks out citing her infertility as the reason, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us share more stories of women rebuilding their lives after heartbreak. Let's witness how a shattered foundation can become the beginning of something beautiful. Just like that, my world collapsed. The home we'd built together, the future we'd planned, all of it gone in a 5-minute conversation. He'd already packed a suitcase, already consulted a lawyer. The betrayal wasn't just in his decision to leave, but in how methodically he'd planned it while I'd been researching fertility clinics, believing we were in this struggle together. That night I'd slept in our guest room, unable to bear the emptiness of our marital bed. By morning, Maxwell had moved out completely, leaving behind only a folder of divorce papers and information about his generous financial settlement, enough for 3 months' rent on a modest apartment while I got on my feet. The settlement seemed like a fortune until I started apartment hunting. 7 years as a housewife had left me with an empty resume and no recent work experience. The only skill I had to offer was the interior design degree I'd abandoned to support Maxwell's career, moving 3 times in 5 years for his promotions. "You have excellent taste, Mrs. Harrington," the rental agent had said during my 12th apartment viewing, "but without employment history or significant assets, owners are hesitant." I finally found a small 1-bedroom above a laundromat, far from our suburban neighborhood, but walking distance to several businesses where I might find work. The constant hum of washing machines below became the soundtrack to my sleepless nights. My bank account dwindled alarmingly. Each morning I applied for office jobs, retail positions, anything that might hire someone with a 7-year gap in employment. Each evening I returned to my apartment with another rejection. 2 weeks after moving in, I found myself staring at our wedding album, wondering how the man who'd promised for better or worse could abandon me so coldly. That's when I remembered our fertility journey, specifically, the 3 embryos we'd frozen during our last IVF attempt. Embryos Maxwell had apparently forgotten about in his rush to start a new family. The fertility clinic was sympathetic but clear about my options. "Mrs. Harrington, since these embryos were created during your marriage, you both have rights to them," the clinic coordinator explained. "However, your consent forms indicate either party may proceed with implantation." I made the appointment immediately, using the last of my settlement money. It felt both desperate and defiant. One final chance at the family I'd always wanted, even if it wasn't the way I'd imagined. Between medical appointments, my job search grew increasingly frantic. My savings nearly depleted. I finally spotted a help-wanted sign at Millie's Diner, a family-owned restaurant 6 blocks from my apartment. Millie herself, a silver-haired woman with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor, interviewed me on the spot. "Never waitressed before?" she asked, eyeing my carefully pressed blouse, the last vestige of my former life. "No, but I learn quickly," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "And I need this job more than you can imagine." Something in my expression must have resonated with her. 6-hour shifts starting tomorrow. Tips are split evenly. Don't be late. That night, I practiced carrying plates up and down my tiny apartment hallway, determined not to fail at this too. The first week at Millie's was brutal. My feet blistered in shoes not designed for standing 8 hours straight. I mixed up orders, spilled coffee, and earned impatient sighs from more experienced servers. But I refused to quit. This job was my lifeline. Gradually I improved. Regular customers began requesting my section. My coworkers, initially standoffish, started including me in their break time conversations. "You're not what we expected," confessed Rita, a single mother of two who'd been at Millie's for 15 years. "When Millie hired you with those pearls and that fancy handbag, we thought you wouldn't last 2 days." I laughed, surprising myself. Honestly, I didn't think I would either. As weeks passed, these women became my unexpected support system. They didn't know about the embryo transfer. That was my secret hope, too fragile to share. But they sensed I was rebuilding from something devastating. Then the divorce was finalized. Maxwell didn't even appear in court, sending his lawyer instead. I sat alone on my side of the courtroom, feeling strangely detached as the judge declared our marriage officially over. No one mentioned children or fertility, just assets, liabilities, and the clinical termination of 7 years together. That evening, I worked a double shift at Millie's, serving plates of comfort food while processing that I was truly on my own now. When Rita noticed my reddened eyes, she simply handed me a fresh apron and covered my tables for 10 minutes without asking questions. 3 days later, the first wave of morning sickness hit during breakfast service. I barely made it to the employee restroom before vomiting violently. When it happened again the following morning, Rita cornered me in the break room. "You're either pregnant or need a doctor," she stated bluntly, offering me a saltine cracker. The home pregnancy test I took that evening, and the 2 I took after it, confirmed what seemed impossible. Against all odds, the embryo transfer had worked. I was pregnant, newly divorced, working for minimum wage plus tips, living above a laundromat. I sat on my bathroom floor for hours, alternating between laughter and tears. This tiny life inside me was both miracle and complication. A connection to the man who'd abandoned me and my only remaining family in the world. Tomorrow I would need to make doctor's appointments, research prenatal care options with my limited insurance, and figure out how to prepare for a baby in my tiny apartment. But tonight I placed my hand over my still flat stomach and made a promise. "We'll figure this out together, little one. Whatever happens, you'll always be wanted." The foundations of my old life had completely shattered. But sitting there on the cold tile floor, I felt the first fragile beginnings of something new taking root. Morning sickness became my unwelcome alarm clock, arriving with brutal predictability at 6:15 a.m., 15 minutes before my scheduled shift. I'd barely have time to brush my teeth before rushing downstairs to Millie's, praying the nausea would subside before I had to serve breakfast. "Eat this before you start," Rita commanded one morning, pushing a plate of plain toast toward me. "Small bites. Trust me, it helps." As a mother of 2, Rita had become my pregnancy guru, offering practical advice without the judgment I feared from others. At 12 weeks, I finally gathered the courage to tell Millie about my pregnancy. I'd rehearsed my speech for days, terrified she'd see me as a liability and cut my hours. Instead, she surprised me. "About time you said something," she responded, arms crossed. "Table 4's been running a betting pool on how long before you'd admit it." She adjusted the schedule on the spot, moving me from the heavy breakfast rush to afternoon shifts. Less running, more sitting between tables. And no more carrying those big coffee urns. Word of my pregnancy spread quickly among the regular customers. Most were kind, leaving extra tips with whispered encouragements or sharing stories of their own children. A few elderly patrons even began bringing hand-knitted baby items, leaving them with their payment. "My Harold worked 2 jobs when I was expecting our first," shared Dot, a widow who came every Tuesday for meatloaf. "You're doing what mothers have always done, whatever it takes." These small kindnesses sustained me through the mounting financial pressure. Each doctor's appointment required difficult calculations. How many extra shifts could I pick up to cover the copay? Which bills could be delayed another week? The prenatal vitamins alone consumed an alarming percentage of my grocery budget. By my second trimester, I developed a ruthless spreadsheet tracking every penny. Baby essentials were categorized by necessity, crib and car seat at the top, cute outfits and fancy gadgets crossed off entirely. I scoured thrift shops on Sunday afternoons, my one day off, collecting gently used baby clothes and equipment at fraction of retail prices. My tiny apartment transformed with each passing month. The living room gradually surrendered to baby preparations. A second-hand crib Rita helped me assemble, a rocking chair rescued from a yard sale, a changing table fashioned from an old dresser I refinished myself. "You've got real talent with this stuff," commented Shelley, another waitress who'd helped me carry the dresser up 3 flights of stairs. Ever think about doing this for money? Fixing up old furniture? I hadn't considered it, but her comment planted a seed. In evenings after my shift, I began watching furniture restoration videos online, taking notes on techniques that might become useful someday. As my belly expanded, my world simultaneously shrank and expanded. Physically, everything became more difficult. The walk to work, standing for hours, even sleeping comfortably seemed impossible. Yet socially, my universe was growing. The diner staff organized a modest baby shower during a slow Tuesday afternoon. Customers I'd served for months brought small gifts. Even the laundromat owner downstairs offered free washing for baby clothes during my first month postpartum. My daughter was a single mom too, he explained gruffly. Someone should have done the same for her. At 7 months, a frightening episode of early contractions forced me to make the hardest decision yet. After a night in the hospital and stern warnings from my doctor, I reluctantly gave notice at Millie's. "About time," Millie said, surprising me again. "Was wondering when you'd finally listen to sense." She handed me an envelope containing severance pay, something I knew the small business could barely afford. "Call it a loan if your pride needs that, but don't you dare refuse it." The final weeks of pregnancy were a strange combination of terror and peace. Terrifying because my carefully saved funds were now my only income, with no guarantee of when I could work again. Peaceful because for the first time I could rest without guilt, preparing mentally for the challenge ahead. Labor began on a rainy Tuesday evening. I called Rita, who drove me to the hospital and stayed through the first 6 hours before her childcare arrangements expired. The remaining 14 hours I labored alone, clutching a photo of the nursery I'd created as a reminder of what waited on the other side of this pain. When the final excruciating pushes brought my son into the world, the rush of love was so overwhelming it erased everything else. The absence of a partner, the financial uncertainty, the fear of failure. In that moment, there was only his perfect face and the fierce certainty that I would do anything to protect him. "What's his name?" the nurse asked, placing his tiny body against my chest. "Leo," I whispered. "It means lion or brave, something we both needed to be." Coming home to our 1-bedroom apartment was both triumphant and terrifying. The first night I barely slept, checking constantly that he was breathing. By the 3rd night, exhaustion won, and I surrendered to a new rhythm dictated entirely by Leo's needs. We established routines born of necessity. I learned to shower during his morning nap, to prepare food one-handed while holding him against my shoulder, to function despite sleep measured in 90-minute increments. Each small victory, the first time I successfully bathed him alone, the day I managed to do laundry without him crying, felt monumental. "You're doing great," Rita assured me during her weekly visits. "The fact that you're worried about doing it right means you're already a good mother." Gradually, impossible became possible, then routine. I discovered strength I never knew existed. The capacity to function despite bone-deep exhaustion, to soothe his cries when my own tears threatened, to keep going when giving up seemed easier. Our tiny apartment, once a reminder of all I'd lost, transformed into something precious. The first home Leo would remember, the place where I discovered who I truly was beneath the layers of Maxwell's wife and failed mother-to-be. Here, surrounded by second-hand furniture and budget-friendly adaptations, I wasn't rebuilding the life I'd lost. I was creating something entirely new. In those early months of Leo's life, I realized that building from scratch wasn't just about acquiring baby items or learning to parent alone. It was about reconstructing my identity around a love more powerful than anything I'd experienced before. A foundation far stronger than the one that had crumbled beneath me. As Leo's first birthday approached, my maternity savings had dwindled to nearly nothing. The furniture restoration hobby that had begun as a distraction during pregnancy became my first lifeline. I'd refinished a few pieces for neighbors in our building who then recommended me to friends. Soon I was balancing motherhood with a small side business, working late into evenings after Leo fell asleep. "Just 3 more chairs to sand, then I can sleep," became my nightly mantra, the rhythmic scraping of sandpaper a lullaby to my exhaustion. The furniture work wasn't enough to sustain us, though. By Leo's 2nd birthday, I was juggling 3 part-time jobs. Weekend shifts back at Millie's, remote data entry during Leo's naps, and furniture restoration whenever I could steal a moment. Sleep became a luxury, often sacrificed for an extra hour of work or precious moments of quiet contemplation after 18-hour days. Rita helped arrange affordable childcare, connecting me with her sister who ran an in-home daycare. Family discount, she insisted, though I knew she was subsidizing the cost herself. I accepted with reluctant gratitude, promising myself I'd repay her kindness someday. Our routine was precisely calibrated. Wake at 5 a.m. to prepare Leo's meals for the day, drop him at daycare by 7, work remote data entry until noon, pick up furniture restoration supplies during lunch, collect Leo by 5, work on furniture projects with him, helping beside me, then perform the nightly rituals of bath, stories, and bedtime. Weekends meant diner shifts with Leo either at Rita's or playing quietly in Millie's back office. "How do you do it all?" new servers would sometimes ask, watching me race from work to motherhood without pause. The truth was, I didn't do it all. Something always suffered. Some nights, too exhausted to read Leo's full bedtime story, I'd abbreviate pages while he drowsily protested. Other times, I'd deliver furniture pieces with imperfect finishes, hoping clients wouldn't notice the corners I'd cut to meet deadlines. When Leo turned 3, I noticed something remarkable during a rare afternoon at the neighborhood playground. While other toddlers climbed cautiously or needed parental assistance, Leo scaled the jungle gym with startling confidence, his movements fluid and precise. "Your boy's got natural coordination," commented an elderly man watching from a nearby bench. "My son coached gymnastics for 30 years. I recognized the signs." I brushed off his observation initially, too preoccupied with financial survival to consider extracurricular activities. But as months passed, Leo's physical abilities became impossible to ignore. He walked earlier than most children, ran sooner, and by 4 was attempting cartwheels and handstands without instruction. One evening after a particularly exhausting day, I found Leo balanced precariously on our sofa armrest, preparing to jump. "Leo, no!" I shouted, lunging toward him. He landed with perfect balance, beaming with accomplishment. "I practiced all day, Mommy. Watch again." That night, I researched community programs, discovering the YMCA offered subsidized gymnastics classes for young children. The schedule conflicted with my data entry hours, forcing a difficult choice. Eventually, I approached my remote employer, negotiating flexibility that cost me income but gained Leo his first formal athletic training. His coach, a former collegiate gymnast named Carlos, pulled me aside after Leo's 3rd class. "Your son has something special," he said quietly. "Raw talent that shouldn't go undeveloped." Pride battled with panic. Developing talent required resources we simply didn't have. Yet watching Leo's face light up during practice sessions, I couldn't bear to limit his potential. "We'll find a way," I promised Carlos. "Whatever it takes." My furniture business expanded to include custom children's beds and play structures, designs inspired by watching Leo's movement needs. Clients paid premium prices for these unique pieces, unaware they were financing my son's growing athletic pursuits. By age 6, Leo's gymnastics coach suggested adding swimming to develop his upper body strength. I traded refinishing the pool manager's antique dining set for Leo's lessons, arriving early to clean the facility in exchange for extended practice time. Our apartment became a makeshift training ground. Sofa cushions repurposed for tumbling practice, doorways fitted with removable bars for pull-ups, hallways marked with tape for balance exercises. We invented games that disguised conditioning work as play, turning financial limitations into creative opportunities. "Why don't my friends have monkey bars in their living room?" Leo asked once, hanging upside down from the reinforced structure I'd built into our ceiling. "Because their moms probably have better decorating sense," I laughed, spotting him as he practiced a new dismount. As Leo grew, so did our conversations. During walks to school, I shared carefully edited stories about our journey. How sometimes life takes unexpected turns, how strength comes from adaptation rather than ideal circumstances. "Like when I fall in gymnastics?" he asked, his 7-year-old wisdom startling me. "Exactly. It's not about never falling, it's about always getting back up." He nodded, absorbing the lesson with surprising depth. "And that's why you work so many jobs? Because you keep getting back up." His perception brought tears to my eyes. "Yes, that's exactly why." Our bond deepened through these shared challenges. Leo learned to prepare simple meals alongside me, to manage household tasks beyond his years, to value what we had rather than yearn for what we didn't. By 8, he was helping me deliver smaller furniture pieces to local clients, proudly explaining the refinishing process to impressed customers. We had created our own world, imperfect but beautiful in its resilience. Which is why, when Maxwell appeared unexpectedly at one of Leo's local gymnastics competitions, the intrusion felt like an earthquake beneath our carefully constructed foundation. I spotted him immediately, still handsome in that polished way, watching from the bleachers with an expression of confused interest. My heart raced as I calculated the resemblance between father and son, now unmistakable as Leo executed a flawless routine on the floor. The moment Leo finished, earning his highest score yet, I forced myself to focus solely on my son's achievement, pushing away the panic rising in my chest. There would be time to confront the past later. For now, this moment belonged to Leo, to us, and the quiet years of growth that had forged us into something stronger than I'd ever imagined possible. "Did you see me, Mom?" Leo called, racing toward me with his medal. "I did it perfect. I saw every second," I answered truthfully, wrapping him in a fierce hug while avoiding looking toward the bleachers. "And you were absolutely amazing." Maxwell waited by the gymnasium exit, his expensive suit out of place among the casual attire of other parents. I gripped Leo's hand tighter as we approached, my mind racing through potential escape routes. "Claire," Maxwell said, his voice sending an unwelcome shiver of familiarity down my spine. "I thought that was you." Leo looked up curiously, sensing my sudden tension. I forced a calm expression. "Leo, honey, why don't you go congratulate Tyler on his routine? I need to speak with this gentleman for a moment." Once Leo was safely out of earshot, I turned to Maxwell. "What are you doing here?" "Business trip. I saw the competition listed in the local events paper." His eyes followed Leo across the gym. "Is he?" "Not here," I interrupted. "This is Leo's moment. You don't get to intrude on it." Maxwell handed me his business card, now showing a prestigious law firm partnership. "Call me. We need to talk." Before walking away, he added, "He has my eyes, Claire." That night, after Leo was asleep, I sat at our small kitchen table, staring at Maxwell's card until the edges frayed from my nervous fingers. The perfectly embossed letters seemed to mock the modest life I'd built. One call could change everything, provide Leo opportunities one could never afford, ease our constant financial struggle. But at what cost? I called Rita instead. "He found us," was all I needed to say. "Want me to come over?" she offered immediately. "No, Leo's asleep." What do I do, Rita?" Her response was characteristically direct. "What does your gut tell you?" "To protect my son." "Then that's what you do." I finally called Maxwell 3 days later, arranging to meet at a coffee shop during Leo's school hours. He arrived punctually as always, now sporting gray at his temples that somehow enhanced his authoritative presence. "He's mine, isn't he?" Maxwell asked without preamble. "Biologically speaking, yes. The embryo transfer worked." He exhaled sharply. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you?" I struggled to maintain composure. "You left me because I couldn't have children, then immediately filed for divorce. When exactly should I have shared this news?" "I had a right to know. And Leo had a right to a father who wanted him unconditionally." The years of anger I'd suppressed for Leo's sake threatened to overflow. Not one who abandoned his mother when conception proved difficult. Maxwell's expression shifted from accusation to calculation. "I want to be part of his life. He deserves the advantages I can provide. He deserves consistency and love." I stood to leave. "Neither of which you've demonstrated the capacity for." "I've changed, Claire. Seeing him, seeing what you've accomplished alone, it's made me reevaluate everything." I paused. "What exactly are you proposing, Maxwell?" His answer came 2 days later, over an extravagant dinner at a restaurant I couldn't have afforded on a month's salary. He outlined a future that once would have seemed like a dream. Remarriage, a home in his affluent neighborhood, private coaching for Leo's gymnastics, the best schools, financial security I'd fought so hard to create on my own. "Leo would have my name, my resources, everything he deserves," Maxwell concluded. "And you wouldn't have to work yourself to exhaustion anymore." The practical benefits were undeniable. No more juggling multiple jobs, no more creative budgeting for Leo's training, No more worrying about medical emergencies or college funds. I need time to think, I told him, my mind whirling with conflicting emotions. For 2 weeks, I observed Maxwell's interactions with Leo during supervised visits. He brought expensive gifts, a professional-grade practice mat, custom gymnastics grips, a tablet loaded with training videos. Leo was cautiously receptive, curious about this man who suddenly showed interest in his achievements. Is he going to be around a lot now? Leo asked one evening as I tucked him in. Would you want that? I countered gently. Leo considered the question with surprising maturity. He knows a lot about gymnastics equipment, but he looks disappointed when I don't do things perfectly. That observation settled in my chest like a weight. I recalled Maxwell's subtle frowns when Leo had struggled with a new skill, his quick glances at other, more accomplished gymnasts. The same perfectionism that had made him intolerant of our fertility struggles was now directed at our son. I arranged to meet Maxwell alone at the park where Leo practiced on weekends. I've made my decision, I told him, watching children play on equipment Leo could navigate with his eyes closed. The answer is no. Maxwell's confidence faltered. Is this about money? Because I can increase the support. It's about what Leo needs. Stability. Unconditional love. A parent who values his effort as much as his achievements. I can provide that, Maxwell insisted. Can you? 8 years ago you walked away when things got difficult. What happens when Leo fails to meet your expectations? When he's no longer the prodigy but just a kid having a bad day? Maxwell's silence was answer enough. I won't subject him to conditional love, I continued. We've built a life where his worth isn't measured by performance or status. I won't trade that for financial comfort. You're making a mistake, Maxwell warned, his lawyer's demeanor surfacing. I could fight for custody. You could try. I met his gaze steadily. But consider what that would do to Leo. And consider what a judge might think about a father who abandoned his wife for supposed infertility, then ignored his child for 8 years. The threat of legal action materialized in certified letters and formal meetings. I leveraged every resource, borrowing money from Rita for a consultation with a family attorney who specialized in complex parentage cases. He has biological connection but no relationship history, the lawyer explained. You have both. Courts favor stability for the child. The battle drained my savings and consumed my energy, but I refused to waver. When Maxwell finally realized I wouldn't bend, he offered a compromise. Regular visitation and financial support without custody claims. I need to know he's part of my legacy, Maxwell admitted during our final negotiation. But I recognized tearing apart his life would be counterproductive. The settlement we reached was practical but emotionally complex. Maxwell would provide financial support for Leo's education and training, with graduated visitation rights that prioritized Leo's comfort and schedule. In return, I wouldn't contest Maxwell acknowledging paternity legally. After signing the papers, I felt neither victory nor defeat, just the profound weight of having chosen the harder path for the right reasons. Financial security would have been easier, the comfortable life as Maxwell's wife familiar territory. But independence, hard-won and precious, was worth the continued struggle. That evening, watching Leo practice handstands against our living room wall, I recognized the quiet strength in our modest life. We had survived abandonment, built a home from nothing, and now weathered the storm of the past resurfacing. Mom, watch this. Leo called, executing a perfect cartwheel across our small living room. I see you, I answered, the words carrying deeper meaning than he could understand. I always see you. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together on our terms, not as beneficiaries of conditional generosity, but as the resilient team we'd always been. 5 years after our confrontation with Maxwell, I stood in our modest kitchen staring at an official envelope bearing the USA Gymnastics logo. Leo, now 13 and towering over me at 5'10", fidgeted nervously beside me. Open it, Mom, he urged, his voice cracking with the adolescent changes that reminded me daily how quickly time was passing. I carefully broke the seal, unfolding the letter inside. My breath caught as I read the opening lines. Congratulations, Leonardo Harrington. My voice trembled as I continued. Selected to represent the United States at the Junior International Gymnastics Competition in Tokyo, Japan. Leo's whoop of excitement rattled the windows as he grabbed the letter, reading it himself as if my words might have been a mistake. I made it. Mom, I made it. Pride surged through me alongside the immediate practical concern. Tokyo. The financial implications were staggering. International airfare, accommodations, meals in one of the world's most expensive cities. The program would cover Leo's basic expenses, but Coach Carlos had emphasized the importance of family support during international competitions. This calls for celebration, I announced, pushing aside my concerns for the evening. Anywhere you want for dinner. Later that night, after Leo had finally fallen asleep, too excited to settle easily despite his rigorous training schedule, I pulled out the calculator and faced reality. Between our modest savings, the furniture business that had grown steadily over the years, and Maxwell's court-mandated educational support, we were still several $1,000s short for the trip. The following morning, I called Rita, now manager at Millie's after the founder's retirement. I need extra shifts, I explained. As many as you can give me. Tokyo. She guessed immediately, having followed Leo's gymnastics journey from its beginnings. Tokyo, I confirmed. For the next 3 months, I worked with single-minded determination. Weekdays were split between my regular data entry job and an accelerated schedule of furniture restorations. Weekends meant double shifts at Millie's, where customers who'd watched Leo grow up through stories and photographs left generous tips toward our Tokyo fund. I sold non-essential belongings, declined any personal expenses, and tracked every penny with military precision. Leo contributed too, insisting on using the small stipend he received from a local sporting goods store that had begun sponsoring him to help with our travel fund. We're a team, Mom, he said with the quiet confidence I'd always tried to instill in him. We get there together or not at all. 2 weeks before departure, the final financial puzzle piece arrived unexpectedly. An envelope containing an airline voucher for a business class seat to Tokyo and a note. Leo deserves to have his mother there. No strings attached. Maxwell. Pride warred with practicality as I stared at the voucher. After brief hesitation, I accepted it, recognizing that sometimes true strength lies in accepting help that benefits your child regardless of its source. Tokyo was a sensory overload of neon crowds and unfamiliar customs. The competition venue, a magnificent sports complex in the heart of the city, displayed flags from 28 nations. Leo's eyes widened at the international atmosphere, his typical teenage nonchalance momentarily replaced by awestruck appreciation. Can you believe we're actually here? He whispered during orientation, squeezing my hand like he used to as a child. We were navigating the complex registration process when a familiar voice cut through the multilingual chatter. Claire? Leo? Maxwell stood before us, not in his expected business attire but wearing credentials identifying him as part of the event's legal team. The past 5 years had added more silver to his temples but little other change. You're working the event? I asked, struggling to maintain composure. I relocated to Tokyo 3 years ago to head our firm's Asian division, he explained. When I saw the USA team roster, I requested this assignment. Leo, more comfortable with Maxwell after years of scheduled visits and phone calls, greeted him with a respectful handshake. Thanks for helping Mom get here, he said directly, demonstrating the honesty I'd always encouraged. Maxwell nodded, something like regret briefly crossing his features. I'll be at your events, he promised Leo before turning to me. We should talk. That conversation happened the following evening at a quiet restaurant near our budget hotel. Over tea that I insisted on paying for myself, Maxwell revealed unexpected vulnerability. Watching from a distance all these years, he began, carefully choosing his words. I've realized what I threw away. Not just a marriage but the chance to truly know my son. To be part of shaping him. You've had visitation rights, I reminded him evenly. Rights aren't relationships. His gaze met mine directly. You refused to remarry me, to accept my financial support beyond what the court mandated, to let me simply buy my way into Leo's life. At the time, I thought you were being stubborn. And now I understand you were being wise. He glanced around the modest restaurant. You've given him something I couldn't have, authenticity. The knowledge that his worth isn't tied to achievement or advantage. The competition spanned 3 days of preliminary events before finals. Leo performed with focused determination, his years of training on makeshift equipment and community center facilities evident in his gritty persistence when a challenging vault didn't go as planned. Maxwell watched from the stands, his expression a complex mixture of pride and regret. During a break between events, he approached me with unexpected candor. "You know what amazes me most?" he asked, watching Leo confer seriously with his coach. "It's not his talent, though that's remarkable. It's his character. The way he encourages younger competitors. How he thanked the facility staff in halting Japanese." He paused. "That's your influence, Claire. Not mine, not genetics. You." On the final day, Leo exceeded all expectations, earning a bronze medal that represented countless hours of sacrifice and determination. As he stood on the podium, eyes glistening with emotion, I felt 13 years of struggle crystallize into a single perfect moment of validation. At the celebration dinner afterward, attended by Maxwell, Leo's coach, and several teammates' families, Leo quieted the table by raising his glass of sparkling cider. "To my mom," he said, his adolescent awkwardness momentarily replaced by earnest gratitude. "Who taught me that the real victory isn't standing on podiums, but standing by the people you love no matter what." As conversations resumed around us, Maxwell leaned closer to me. "You were right to refuse me," he admitted softly. "I wanted to give him things. You gave him roots." The Tokyo sky glittered with stars as Leo and I walked back to our hotel that night, his medal tucked safely in his jacket pocket. The journey from a broken marriage to this moment hadn't followed any path I could have imagined, yet somehow, we had arrived exactly where we needed to be. "Do you ever regret it?" Leo asked unexpectedly. "Doing all this alone?" I looked at my son, strong, compassionate, resilient in ways that extended far beyond athletics, and felt the full circle of our journey complete itself. "Not for a single moment," I answered truthfully. "Some broken things aren't meant to be repaired. They're meant to become something entirely new and more beautiful than before." Leo nodded, understanding beyond his years. "Like us." "Exactly like us," I agreed as Tokyo's lights illuminated our path forward. Two people who had transformed life's deepest challenges into its greatest blessings. My boss laced his fingers together, his smirk dripping with false sympathy. "Emma, your dedication is inspiring. But we're promoting Jessica. She's got that natural leadership quality." I kept my face blank as I handed him the envelope. His confusion was delicious when he discovered not just my resignation, but the signed contracts with our biggest client, who just agreed to follow me to my new firm. "We've decided to go with Jessica for the senior contract specialist position." The words hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. Richard's office suddenly felt smaller, the air thinner. I maintained perfect composure, spine straight, hands folded neatly in my lap, face a carefully constructed mask of professional disappointment. Not devastation. Not rage. Just the appropriate amount of disappointment a dedicated employee might show after being passed over for a promotion. "I see." My voice didn't waver. 7 years of negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts had taught me something about poker faces. Richard laced his fingers together on his polished mahogany desk. The desk guide helped him earn with my billable hours. His lips curved into what he probably thought was a sympathetic smile, but the smugness leaked through like oil on water. "Emma, your dedication is truly inspiring," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Your technical skills are exceptional. But leadership requires a certain, natural quality. Jessica has that intangible something. The executive presence." Translation: Jessica laughs at his jokes at happy hour while I'm still at my desk closing deals. I nodded thoughtfully as though considering his wisdom. "I understand," I said, my voice measured and calm. "May I ask what specifically I could improve for future consideration?" The slight widening of his eyes told me he hadn't expected such a reasonable response. Richard shifted in his leather chair, the one purchased after I brought in the Westbrook Industries account last year. "Well, it's not really about improvement. You're excellent at what you do. It's more about..." He gestured vaguely with his manicured hands. "Executive presence. Team dynamics. Jessica connects with people." "Jessica connects with the right people," I silently corrected. Specifically Richard and the other 3 men on the executive committee. Through the glass wall of his office, I could see her watching our meeting from her desk, pretending to review documents while stealing glances our way. Her designer blazer, purchased with the company card for client meetings, perfectly complemented her highlighted hair. I appreciate the feedback, I said, reaching down for my leather portfolio. The one I'd bought myself after bringing in Meridian Systems, which had increased our annual revenue by 22%. No company card required. Richard relaxed visibly, clearly relieved I wasn't going to make a scene. In his world, women who expressed disappointment were emotional. Women who expressed anger were difficult. I would be neither. Great. Well, I know you'll continue to be a valuable member of the team. Jessica will need your support during this transition, he said, already reaching for his phone, dismissing me. I stood up smoothly, smiled professionally, and placed a sealed cream envelope on his desk. What's this? He looked up, brow furrowed. My formal response to the promotion decision, I said pleasantly. Please review it at your convenience. I'd appreciate your signature on the second page. Confusion flickered across his face. This wasn't in his script. Good. I turned and walked out, shoulders back, head high. Jessica quickly averted her gaze as I passed her desk. 3 other associates suddenly became very interested in their computer screens. They all knew I'd been passed over again. The elevator doors closed and I allowed myself exactly 3 deep breaths before the mask slipped back into place. My Monday morning routine continued as usual. I nodded to Greta at reception, waved to Marco from IT, and settled at my meticulously organized desk. 8:47 a.m. My phone pinged with a text from Meredith, the retiring finance director. Did you do it? I typed back a simple, done. Opening the envelope now. On my screen, I pulled up the quarterly revenue report I'd compiled but never shared with Richard. The one showing I'd personally managed 42.7% of Henderson and Myers client contracts last quarter. The one showing my billable hours exceeded Jessica's by 43%. The one showing client satisfaction scores where my name consistently topped the rankings. The phone on my desk rang precisely at 9:05 a.m. Richard's extension. I let it ring twice before answering. Emma Lawson. Emma. His voice was tight. Could you come back to my office, please? I'm preparing for the Dawson conference call at 9:30, I replied calmly. Would 10:15 work? The pause was delicious. Now would be better, he said, a new edge in his voice. I arrived exactly 3 minutes later, enough time for him to stew but not enough to claim I was being insubordinate. The envelope lay open on his desk, its contents spread before him. His face had lost its smug confidence, replaced by something between shock and anger. What is this? He jabbed a finger at the papers. My resignation letter is on top, I said helpfully. Effective immediately as outlined in Section 3 of my employment contract regarding past promotions. I'm aware of what a resignation letter looks like, he snapped. I'm asking about this. He held up the second document, the one with Westbrook Industries letterhead and freshly signed contract. That would be Westbrook's new service agreement, I replied evenly. Richard's face flushed. With a company called Outcome Partners? What the hell is Outcome Partners? I allowed myself the smallest smile. My new firm. His voice cracked. This is Westbrook. They're our biggest client. They were, I corrected gently. The CEO was quite interested in our new contract model. One that bills based on successful outcomes rather than billable hours. They've committed to a 2-year exclusive arrangement. Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish suddenly finding itself on dry land. His eyes darted to the signature page where Thomas Westbrook's distinctive scrawl made the $60 million transition official. This is breach of contract. This is client poaching. His voice rose with each word. I shook my head slightly. You might want to review Section 8.2 of my employment agreement. Non-competes are unenforceable in this state when an employee is passed over for promotion twice in favor of less qualified candidates. I paused. Your legal department drafted that clause, actually. Ironic. The blood drained from his face as comprehension dawned. He wasn't just losing me. He was losing Westbrook. And not just losing a client. Watching them sign on with a revolutionary business model that would make Henderson and Meyer look outdated and overpriced. You can't, he started. My personal items have been cleared from my desk, I interrupted smoothly. My files are organized according to company protocol. Jessica should have no trouble taking over my remaining accounts. I allowed myself the smallest pause. Those that decide to stay, of course. I stood smoothing my skirt. I'll need your signature acknowledging receipt of my resignation. Richard stared at me, truly seeing me, perhaps for the first time in 7 years. You've been planning this, he said slowly. I met his gaze evenly. Let's just say I've learned to prepare for all potential outcomes. That's what makes a good contract specialist, after all. I walked out without waiting for his response, past Jessica's desk where she sat frozen, past the curious eyes of colleagues who would soon be scrambling as news spread. My phone buzzed with a text from Meredith. Conference room booked for 2 p.m. 5 more ready to sign. The morning sun felt different on my face as I exited the building's revolving door for the last time. I hadn't just resigned. I hadn't just taken a client. I'd changed the game entirely. And I was just getting started. The morning air felt electric against my skin as I walked away from Henderson and Meyer for the last time. Freedom has a particular scent, like rain-washed concrete and possibility. I checked my watch. 9:47 a.m. By noon, Richard would be in emergency mode. By end of day, panic would set in. I smiled at the thought, allowing myself this moment of satisfaction as I slipped into the corner cafe where I'd spent countless lunch breaks crafting my escape plan. 7 years ago, I'd walked into Henderson and Meyer with starry-eyed optimism and a freshly printed law degree. I remembered my first week. The pride of having landed at one of Chicago's most prestigious legal consulting firms, the weight of my new business cards in my pocket, the earnest belief that dedication and excellence would be recognized and rewarded. The memory of my first stolen idea surfaced as I ordered my usual Americano. It was during the Calway manufacturing contract negotiation, barely 6 months into my tenure. I'd developed an innovative approach to their international licensing structure that would save them millions while ensuring better compliance. I'd shared it during the team meeting, watching the partners nod with approval. 2 weeks later, Mark Daniels had presented it as his own breakthrough during the client meeting. I'd sat silently at the conference table, stomach churning as he accepted praise for my work. When I confronted him afterward, his response had been casual, almost bored. That's how it works here, rookie. For a team. Ideas belong to the firm. His eyes had flickered to the corner office where Richard held court. Learn to play the game if you want to get ahead. The barista called my name, interrupting the memory. I collected my coffee and found a quiet corner table, pulling out my phone to check for messages from Meredith about our afternoon meeting with the other defectors. The pattern had continued through the years. My contract solutions for Barton Healthcare had become Jessica's innovative approach. My risk mitigation strategy for Pioneer Tech had suddenly appeared in Richard's presentation to the executive board. Each time I swallowed my frustration and worked harder, believing that eventually results would speak for themselves. It wasn't until the Meridian Systems project 3 years ago that the deeper problem came into focus. Their CEO, Diane Winters, had pulled me aside after we'd finalized their service agreement. "Emma, I want to be straight with you," she'd said, voice low. "We're signing with your firm because of your approach, but I have concerns about your billing structure." I'd stiffened, thinking she was negotiating for lower rates. "The billable hour model creates perverse incentives," she continued. "Your firm has no motivation to solve our problems efficiently. The longer it takes, the more you make." Her words had struck like lightning. Of course she was right. Our entire business model rewarded inefficiency. Partners celebrated associates who could stretch 20-hour solutions into 40 billable hours. We tracked hours captured rather than problems solved. Success meant maximizing the invoice, not maximizing client outcomes. That night, I'd started a new spreadsheet, one I kept strictly on my personal laptop. I began documenting client frustrations, whispered complaints, and the disconnect between what they needed and what Henderson and Meyer delivered. Over coffee meetings and after-hours calls, I asked careful questions. How did they measure success? What kept them awake at night? What would they change about working with legal consultants if they could? The patterns emerged clearly. Clients hated unpredictable costs. They resented paying premium rates for junior associates learning on their dime. They wanted partners in their success, not vendors with conflicting interests. Late nights in my apartment became dedicated to designing a different model. I covered my walls with sticky notes and flow charts, sketching an approach that would align my interests with my clients. My kitchen table disappeared under legal pads filled with formulas and projections. The solution crystallized gradually: fixed fees tied to specific outcomes, clearly defined deliverables with success metrics, shared risk and reward. A complete inversion of the billable hour paradigm that had dominated legal consulting for decades. But the pivotal moment, the one that transformed theoretical rebellion into concrete action, came 6 months ago during the Westbrook Industries' annual contract renewal. Thomas Westbrook had requested a private lunch. As CEO of our largest client, such requests weren't unusual. What was unusual was his choice of venue, not the usual expense account steakhouse, but a modest sandwich shop near their offices. "Emma, I've always appreciated your straight talk," he said after we ordered. His weathered face looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "So I'm going to be straight with you. We're considering other options when this contract ends." My stomach had dropped. Losing Westbrook would be catastrophic for Henderson and Meyer, and would likely be blamed on me, their account manager. "May I ask why?" I kept my voice even, professional. Thomas sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "Last quarter we paid your firm $427,000. I've been trying to justify that expense to my board. The complex regulatory framework," I began automatically. "Isn't the issue," he interrupted gently. "The issue is that I can't connect those hours to actual business outcomes. We're paying for time, not results." He leaned forward. "Do you know what my manufacturing division head asked me?" He said, "Why do they get paid the same whether we win or lose?" Something shifted inside me at that moment, the final piece clicking into place. I took a risk. "What if there was a different way?" I asked. "What if you could pay for outcomes instead of hours?" His eyebrows rose. "I'm listening." "A fixed fee structure. Clearly defined deliverables. Performance bonuses tied to your success metrics. A true partnership where we succeed only when you do." Henderson and Meyer would agree to that? Skepticism colored his voice. "Not them," I said, the words forming before I'd fully processed the implications. "But I would." The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours. By the end, the outline of outcome partners existed on a napkin between us, and the seed of my departure from Henderson and Meyer had firmly taken root. In the weeks that followed, I meticulously prepared. I incorporated my new firm, secured modest office space, and drafted the revolutionary contract model that would become my signature. I identified other overlooked talents at competing firms who shared my vision. And I carefully, quietly, laid the groundwork with Westbrook's legal team for their transition to my new company. My phone buzzed, pulling me back to the present. A text from Meredith. "Richard in complete meltdown. Board emergency meeting called. Jessica looks like she's seen a ghost." I smiled, finished my coffee and stood to leave. The seeds of discontent had been planted years ago by Henderson and Meyer themselves. Today they would begin to harvest what they had sown. And I would begin to build something better from the ground up. I left the cafe and headed toward the co-working space I'd secured 3 months earlier. My temporary headquarters until Outcome Partners' official launch. The irony wasn't lost on me that while Richard had been busy scheduling champagne celebrations for Jessica's promotion, I'd been signing a lease and ordering business cards. My phone buzzed with another text from Meredith. "Meeting's still on for 2. Bringing the financial projections you requested. P.S. Your replacement desk plant is already dead." I smiled despite myself. Meredith Collins had been the most unexpected part of my plan. The firm's finance director was hardly someone I'd pegged as a rebel. With her sensible shoes, meticulous accounting standards and 27 years at Henderson and Meyer. Yet she'd become my most valuable ally. Our unlikely partnership had begun 4 months ago during the annual budget review. I'd noticed discrepancies in how client profitability was calculated and had sent her a detailed analysis. Rather than dismissing my observations, she'd invited me to lunch. "You're the first person in 15 years to actually understand these numbers," she'd said, studying me over her glasses. "And you're right, the metrics are flawed." That lunch had turned into a series of conversations where Meredith gradually revealed her own frustrations with the firm's increasingly profit-driven culture. When I cautiously shared my alternative vision, I expected skepticism. Instead, she'd become its champion. "I'm retiring in 6 months," she told me. too late to change Henderson and Meyer, but not too late to help build something better. With Meredith's guidance on financial structure, my vision had gained solid footing. But I knew I couldn't build a revolutionary firm alone. I needed a team of like-minded professionals, ones who wouldn't run straight to Richard with my plans. The industry was full of brilliant people held back by outdated structures and biases. I'd spent years observing who was overlooked, who grumbled about the status quo, who showed flashes of innovative thinking quickly stifled by tradition-bound partners. My first recruitment target had been Alice Chin, a contracts associate at Davenport Legal whom I'd met at industry conferences. Brilliant but repeatedly passed over for promotion due to her lack of polish. Code for her direct communication style and refusal to engage in office politics. Our conversation at a legal technology summit had been carefully casual. Ever wonder why we're still using the same billing model from the 1950s? I'd asked as we waited for a panel to begin. Her eyes had lit up. Only every single day. My clients hate the unpredictability and I hate tracking my life in 6-minute increments. 3 coffee meetings later, Alice had become the first member of what I privately called my shadow network. She'd agreed to join Outcome Partners once it launched, bringing her expertise in technology contracts and her loyal client relationships. Next came James Washington, a risk assessment specialist whose innovative approaches at Berger & Klein were consistently sidelined for more conservative methods. Then Nadia Patel, whose client-oriented mindset had made her popular with customers but unpopular with partners focused on maximizing billable hours. One by one, I'd identified and carefully recruited a team of 6 exceptional professionals. All undervalued at their current firms, all excited by the vision of a different kind of legal consulting practice. The delicate balance was maintaining absolute secrecy while continuing to perform flawlessly at Henderson and Meyer. I couldn't risk Richard discovering my plans before they were fully formed. Each meeting was conducted off-site, each communication carefully worded and sent through personal accounts. The ethical considerations weighed heavily. I'd reviewed my employment contract repeatedly, ensuring I operated within its boundaries. I never approached Henderson and Meyer clients directly about my new venture while still employed. I never used company resources for my planning. I maintained a clear boundary between my work for the firm and my preparation for independence. Still, the conflict troubled me during sleepless nights. 7 years of my professional life had been devoted to Henderson and Meyer. Despite the slights and stolen credit, part of me still felt the pull of loyalty. Or perhaps it was just familiarity disguised as loyalty. One particularly difficult evening, I'd called Meredith in a moment of doubt. Am I being petty? I'd asked her. Throwing away a stable career because I didn't get promoted? Her response had been characteristically blunt. Emma, this isn't about a promotion. This is about building something that actually serves clients better. If you stay, you're choosing comfort over purpose. Those words had strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about professional recognition. It was about creating a model that aligned with my values. The most intensive planning had happened during twice-weekly strategy sessions in my apartment. My dining table became command central as my shadow team gathered after hours. Laptops open, takeout containers scattered among legal pads and spreadsheets. The key is quantifiable outcomes, James had insisted during one passionate debate about our contract structure. We need metrics that clients and we both agree represent success. And scalable pricing tiers, Alice added. Not every client needs the comprehensive package. Nadia had focused on the client experience. We need to demonstrate value from day one. No more mysterious processes hidden behind legal jargon. These sessions had refined my initial concept into a comprehensive business plan. We dissected traditional contracts, reimagined client onboarding, developed proprietary assessment tools, and created transparent pricing models tied to specific deliverables. The breakthrough in our payment model had come from Meredith. She'd arrived at one session with a stack of spreadsheets and a gleam in her eye. What if, she'd proposed, spreading the papers across my table, we structure a baseline fee plus performance incentives. Clients get certainty about minimum costs, and we get rewarded for exceptional results. Her decades of financial expertise had transformed theoretical ideas into practical systems. She'd shown us how to build profitability without exploiting clients, how to structure contracts that protected cash flow while aligning interests. As I entered the co-working space, modern, filled with natural light, nothing like Henderson and Meyer's wood-paneled stuffiness, I felt a surge of certainty. The shadow network was about to step into the light. My temporary office held a simple desk, my laptop, and a whiteboard covered with our launch timeline. On the desk sat a small potted plant, a gift from Alice with a note. Something new is growing. I checked my watch. 11:30 a.m. In 2.5 hours, my shadow team would gather for the first time as official partners and outcome partners. Westbrook Industries would be announced as our founding client. And Henderson and Meyer would begin to understand exactly what they had lost. My phone buzzed again. A text from Thomas Westbrook. Richard called. Offered 15% discount to keep our business. Told him we're not looking for cheaper hours. We're looking for better results. Good luck today. I smiled, setting my phone aside and opening my laptop to prepare for the afternoon meeting. The seeds of discontent had grown into a network of shared vision. And now that network was about to change everything. The 2 p.m. meeting with my shadow team, now officially my partners, ended with quiet determination rather than champagne. We weren't celebrating yet. Today marked the beginning of our real work, not its culmination. I'll see you all tomorrow at the new office, I said as we gathered our materials. 9 a.m. sharp. Our permanent location was nothing like Henderson and Meyer's gleaming downtown high-rise with its panoramic lake views and pretentious art collection. We'd chosen a converted textile factory in the West Loop. A brick building with exposed beams, factory windows, and a history of making things that served practical purposes. The symbolism wasn't accidental. While Henderson and Meyer sold prestige and tradition, we would sell results and innovation. Their mahogany and leather projected establishment, our brick and steel projected substance. After the meeting dispersed, I drove to the new space for a final inspection before tomorrow's official move-in. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long rectangles of light across the polished concrete floors. The contractors had finished right on schedule. Workstations assembled, network installed, conference room ready with its reclaimed wood table. I walked through slowly, mentally placing each team member in their space. Alice near the windows where she worked best. James by the strategy wall where we'd map client projects. Nadia close to the collaboration area she'd helped design. My own office was modest, glass-walled for transparency but positioned to allow private conversations when needed. No status furniture, just functional design. The only indulgence was a small balcony overlooking the neighborhood, where I imagined taking breaks when strategic thinking required fresh air. As I stood in the empty space, I replayed the morning's events in my mind, the culmination of months of careful planning. I'd arrived at Henderson and Meyer earlier than usual, before most associates. The security guard had nodded his usual greeting, unaware it would be our last. My desk was exactly as I'd left it Friday. Organized, minimal, professional. Nothing personal had decorated my workspace for months. I'd been slowly removing items, preparing for this day. The few remaining personal effects fit into a small bag. A fountain pen from my father, a leather notebook, reference materials I'd purchased myself. Company items stayed neatly arranged. I was determined that no one could claim I'd left things in disarray. More important than physical objects was digital evidence. I connected my external drive, carefully keeping it separate from company equipment, and transferred final copies of my performance metrics, client satisfaction surveys, and revenue reports. All data I was entitled to under my employment agreement, all meticulously documented for the inevitable legal challenges Richard would attempt. My final task had been backing up email exchanges that demonstrated my ideas being appropriated without credit. Not for litigation purposes, I had no interest in a protracted legal battle, but as protection against any attempt to damage my professional reputation. By 8:30 a.m., all evidence of my 7 years was contained in one small bag and one small drive. 7 years distilled to what could be carried in one hand. It should have felt sad. Instead, it felt like liberation. The memory of Richard's face when he'd opened the envelope still brought a flutter of satisfaction. I'd seen the exact moment comprehension dawned. The widening eyes, the slackening jaw, the flush of angry disbelief. He hadn't just lost an employee. He'd lost a cornerstone client and faced an existential threat to his business model. This won't stand, he'd sputtered, legal threats already forming. No court will allow this kind of. Innovation. I'd suggested calmly. Client-centered service? Ethical business practices. His incoherent rage had told me everything I needed to know about the true values of Henderson and Meyer. Not once in his protests had he mentioned client needs or service quality. His concerns centered entirely on revenue loss and competitive threats. When I'd walked out of his office for the final time, the ripple effect was immediate. Associates looked up from their desks, sensing something momentous. The firm operated on subtle hierarchies and power dynamics. They could read the shift in the atmosphere like animals sensing a coming storm. Jessica had caught my eye across the office, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to uncertain concern. She'd wanted my job title, not understanding the burden that came with it, especially now. "Emma," she'd called as I headed toward the elevator. "Is everything okay?" I'd paused, considering my response carefully. Professional until the end. "Congratulations again on the promotion, Jessica. I'm sure Richard will fill you in on the Westbrook situation. They'll need immediate attention." I'd offered a small smile. "Their contract transition is somewhat complex." The confusion in her eyes had shifted to the first flickers of panic. Jessica was many things, but she wasn't stupid. She could sense she'd inherited a potential disaster. As the elevator doors had closed on Henderson and Meyer for the final time, I'd permitted myself one small private smile. Not of malice, but of completion. Phase 1. Concluded perfectly. Now, standing in the new Outcome Partners office as sunset painted the brick walls golden, I finally allowed the emotional dam to break. 4 months I'd operated with ruthless compartmentalization. Planning while performing, building while maintaining, creating while concluding. I sank into my office chair, the only piece of furniture already in place, and felt the first tear slide down my cheek. Not from sadness or regret, but from the overwhelming release of pressure. 7 years of suppressed frustration, of smiling through stolen credit, of watching mediocrity rewarded while excellence was exploited, all of it washed through me in waves. Fear followed quickly. I'd left the security of an established firm for the uncertainty of entrepreneurship. 6 people had trusted my vision enough to join me. Westbrook had staked their legal strategy on our unproven model. The responsibility was enormous. But beneath the fear lay something stronger, a bedrock of certainty. The model was sound. The team was exceptional. The market was ready for disruption. And I was, finally, the architect of my own destiny. As darkness fell outside, I moved through the office, turning on lights one by one. Tomorrow these spaces would fill with energy, ideas, and purpose. Tomorrow we would begin to build something that reflected our values instead of compromising them. My phone buzzed with a text from Alice. "Just got a call from Kenneth at Meridian Systems. Heard about your move. Wants to be our second client. Says he's been waiting for someone to fix this broken industry. You free for lunch tomorrow?" Vindication surged through me. This was never about stealing clients. It was about answering a need that had always existed but that traditional firms refused to acknowledge. I walked to the windows overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Richard was likely huddled with his partners strategizing damage control. Jessica was probably poring over the Westbrook files, realizing the complexity she'd inherited. And Thomas Westbrook was perhaps explaining to his board why their legal strategy had just improved dramatically. I took a deep breath and turned to leave, pausing at the door to look back at the empty office that would soon become a hub of transformation. On the wall, our simple mission statement awaited tomorrow's unveiling. Success is shared. Outcomes matter. Clients first. The perfect exit wasn't just about leaving Henderson and Meyer. It was about entering something infinitely better. The morning after my final visit to our new office, reality hit hard. Westbrook Industries and the newly interested Meridian Systems represented impressive wins. But 2 clients, even large ones, weren't enough to sustain a firm of 6 partners and the support staff we needed to hire. We had 6 months of operating capital. The clock was ticking. Our official launch day brought excitement tinged with anxiety. As we gathered in our new conference room, Nadia voiced what everyone was thinking. "Henderson and Meyer isn't going to take this lying down," she said, tapping her pen against her notebook. "Richard has connections throughout the industry. We should prepare for blowback." She wasn't wrong. By the end of our first week, we'd heard from 3 prospective clients who'd suddenly backed out of meetings. One was honest enough to tell us why. Richard Holloway called my CO personally, the operations director admitted. Said you were facing potential legal action for client poaching. We can't risk getting caught in the crossfire. That Friday, James slapped a legal letter on the conference table. Cease and desist, he announced. They're claiming we're misusing proprietary contract language. Are we? Alice asked, reaching for the document. Of course not, I replied, maintaining my composure despite the knot in my stomach. They're phishing. Standard intimidation tactics. But privately the pressure weighed heavily. Each morning I arrived at the office before anyone else, reviewing our financial projections, adjusting our runway calculations. Each evening I was the last to leave, often sitting alone on my small balcony, wondering if I'd led my team off a cliff in pursuit of a vision only I could see. The turning point came unexpectedly. The Chicago Legal Technology Association had invited speakers for their annual conference. When a scheduled presenter canceled last minute, Meredith, now our official financial advisor, leveraged her connections to secure me the slot. This is our chance, she said. 75 decision-makers in one room. Make it count. I spent 3 days preparing that presentation, distilling everything we'd learned into 20 minutes that would either launch us forward or confirm we were tilting at windmills. The conference room was half empty when I began, an unknown speaker in an unfavorable time slot. But as I spoke, outlining the fundamental misalignment between traditional billing models and client interests, people drifted in from other sessions. By the time I revealed our outcome-based contract framework, showing actual results from our work with Westbrook, the room had filled. Legal consulting doesn't have a knowledge problem, I concluded. It has an incentive problem. When success for the firm means maximizing hours instead of results, clients inevitably lose. We've created a model where we only win when you win. The questions afterward weren't skeptical but hungry. Business leaders struggling with legal costs wanted to know more. In-house counsel frustrated with unpredictable budgets requested meetings. Even 2 law school professors asked for materials to share with their classes on legal innovation. That presentation became our turning point. We refined it into a roadshow presenting at industry events across the Midwest. Our calendar began filling with exploratory meetings. Not all converted to clients, but enough did to extend our runway. Henderson and Myers' counterattacks intensified. They dropped their rates for key prospects we were approaching. They circulated rumors about our financial stability. One particularly aggressive partner even called our landlord, suggesting we might not make our lease obligations. But the market was responding to our message. Mid-sized companies especially, those big enough to need sophisticated legal help but small enough to feel the pain of traditional billing, began signing on. They'd been caught for years between expensive big firms and insufficient small practices. Our model offered them sophisticated service with predictable costs tied to measurable outcomes. 4 months in, we hired our first 2 associates. 6 months in, we added specialized practice areas based on client demand. 8 months in, we moved to a larger space in the same building, taking over the entire floor. Our contract model evolved through real-world application. We developed tiered pricing options, industry-specific metrics, and shared risk provisions that traditional firms couldn't match without fundamentally reorganizing their entire business approach. 9 months after launching Outcome Partners, I attended the National Legal Innovation Summit in Denver. During a morning coffee break, I turned from the refreshment table and found myself face-to-face with Richard Holloway. The shock registered on both our faces. He recovered first, forcing a tight smile. "Emma, I heard you might be here." "Richard," I acknowledged with a nod. "Enjoying the conference?" He glanced down at his program, which featured a panel I was leading that afternoon on alternative fee arrangements. It's always good to keep up with trends. I noticed the new stress lines around his eyes, the slight dishevelment of his normally impeccable appearance. Henderson and Myers' name badge on his lapel now featured a new tagline, "Value-based legal solutions." "I see you've updated your branding," I observed. He straightened defensively. "The industry evolves. We evolve with it." "And how's Jessica handling the transition to value-based billing?" I couldn't resist asking. It requires quite a different mindset from hourly work. His expression tightened. "Jessica has moved on to other opportunities." Translation: Jessica had failed spectacularly when actual results were required. As awkward silence stretched between us, a conference organizer approached. "Ms. Lawson, your panel prep meeting is starting." "If you'll excuse me," I said to Richard. He nodded stiffly, but as I turned to leave, he called after me. "Emma." I looked back. Was it always about this? Building a new model? Or was it about proving a point? The question surprised me with its vulnerability. For a moment, I glimpsed the uncertainty behind his polished facade. A man watching the industry shift beneath his feet, scrambling to adapt practices he'd spent decades mastering. "It was about alignment," I answered honestly. "Creating a system where doing right by clients means doing well ourselves." He absorbed this, then asked more quietly, "And the timing?" "Right after the promotion decision." I met his gaze directly. The promotion was just confirmation of what I already knew. That my vision for legal consulting would never fit within Henderson and Meyer. He nodded slowly. "Well, you've certainly made an impression on the industry." It wasn't quite an acknowledgement of my success, but it was the closest thing to respect he'd ever shown me. 1 year to the day after I'd placed my resignation letter on Richard's desk, we gathered at Outcome Partners to celebrate our anniversary. The team had grown to 17 people. Our client roster had expanded to 23 companies. Our revenue had exceeded even Meredith's optimistic projections. As I looked around at the faces of my team, dedicated, energized, proud of their work, I realized that success had redefined itself. Yes, we'd built a profitable firm. Yes, we'd attracted impressive clients. But our true accomplishment was larger. 3 of our competitors had introduced their own versions of outcome-based billing. Legal publications had run features on the value revolution in consulting. Most tellingly, clients across the industry had begun demanding different fee structures from their existing firms. We'd changed more than our own trajectories. We'd shifted the expectations of an entire industry. I raised my glass to my team. "To 1 year of Outcome Partners," I said. "And to all of you who took the risk to build something better." Glasses clinked amid cheers and laughter. In a quiet moment during the celebration, Meredith found me on my office balcony, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "Thinking about Henderson and Meyer?" she asked, joining me at the railing. I smiled. "Actually, no. I was thinking about tomorrow. About where we go from here." She nodded approvingly. "That's why you succeeded, you know. Richard is still trying to preserve the past. You've always focused on building the future." As the evening continued inside, I took one more moment alone with my thoughts. My boss had once told me I lacked that natural leadership quality. He'd been wrong. Leadership wasn't about social polish or political maneuvering. Real leadership was about seeing a better way forward and having the courage to create it, even when you had to build the path yourself. I hadn't just found my way out of Henderson and Meyer. I'd found my way forward. And in doing so changed the game for everyone. My fiancé dumped me because his ex faked a coma. His mother yelled, "Stay single if you don't respect love." So I disappeared without a word. Recently they found me standing speechless outside a grand Venice cathedral, where I was walking down the aisle, marrying his ex's younger millionaire brother who worshipped me. "Stay single if you don't respect love." Natalie's voice echoed through the empty restaurant, her words slicing through me like the chef's knife I'd wielded for years. But it wasn't directed at me. It was aimed at her son, my ex-fiancé, who stood with his head bowed, unable to meet anyone's eyes after what he'd done. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the stainless steel prep table, the same table where Caleb had first kissed me 2 years ago. The kitchen of Harvest and Hearth, once my sanctuary, now felt like a tomb for my buried dreams. Just 3 hours earlier, I had been executive chef Aria Mitchell, respected culinary artist and future wife to the owner's son. Now I was just Aria, abandoned, humiliated, and burning with a quiet rage that threatened to consume me. "I never meant to hurt you, Aria," Caleb whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of refrigerators. "Penelope needs me. Her condition. Her condition is a lie," I said flatly, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded despite the hurricane raging inside me. "But your feelings for her aren't, are they? They never were." If this story of heartbreak and unexpected revenge resonates with you, hit subscribe to join our community. It's free and you'll never miss another journey of someone rising from betrayal to find their own justice. Now let's see how Arya's world came crashing down. The truth had been hiding in plain sight, like a bitter ingredient in an otherwise perfect dish. All those late-night texts he'd try to hide. The way he'd grow distant whenever her name came up in conversation. I had ignored the signs, too busy perfecting my béarnaise sauce and planning our forever. When I first started at Harvest and Hearth 5 years ago, I was nobody, just another line cook with big dreams and student loans. Joel Harrington took a chance on me when no other upscale restaurant would. I worked my way up, impressing him with my work ethic and innovative take on classic American cuisine. My maple-glazed duck with cherry reduction became the restaurant's signature dish, written up in food magazines and bringing in diners from 3 states away. "Your hands speak truth through food," Joel once told me, his eyes crinkling with pride. "That's rare, Arya. Most chefs cook with their ego. You cook with your soul." When Caleb started hanging around the kitchen more, I assumed he was there on his father's orders, learning the business he would one day inherit. I didn't realize he was watching me, fascinated by my dedication. Our romance bloomed slowly, coffee after closing, walks by the river discussing menu ideas, and finally, a kiss that tasted like the raspberry sorbet I'd been experimenting with. "You're different," he told me. After Penelope, I didn't think I'd feel this way again. Penelope Kingston. The name that would eventually destroy everything. His college sweetheart, the society girl whose family vacationed with senators. She'd broken his heart 3 years before I met him, leaving him for a finance guy in Chicago. I never worried about her, she was ancient history, or so I thought. Joel had embraced our relationship with unexpected enthusiasm. "You've got something special, Arya," he'd said one evening after service, placing a fatherly hand on my shoulder. "You remind me of myself at your age, hungry for perfection, never satisfied with good enough. Caleb needs someone like you." When Caleb proposed in the herb garden behind the restaurant, Joel was the first to celebrate, opening a bottle of Dom Perignon he'd been saving for a special occasion. "To my future daughter," he toasted, his eyes misty. The daughter I never had but always wanted. The wedding planning consumed my free time. Joel insisted on hosting the reception at the restaurant, closing it for a full weekend, something he'd never done before. "Nothing but the best for my kids," he'd beamed. I had designed a 9-course tasting menu that told our love story through food. The invitations had gone out just last week. Then Penelope came back to town. "Just catching up with an old friend," Caleb had assured me when I found out they'd met for coffee. I believed him because that's what trust is supposed to be. One coffee turned into texting, which turned into lunch. I was too busy finalizing wedding details and running the kitchen to notice how his eyes lit up when his phone buzzed. 3 days ago, Caleb rushed out of the restaurant mid-service. "Emergency," he'd mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "Penelope's in the hospital. Collapsed suddenly. They don't know if she'll wake up." I gave him space, covered his responsibilities at the restaurant, and waited for updates. When he didn't come home that night, I told myself he was being a good friend. When he didn't come home the second night, worry crept in like smoke under a door. This morning, I overheard Natalie on the phone in Joel's office. "What do you mean Penelope's doctor hasn't authorized any visitors? Caleb's been with her for 2 days." The pots and pans I'd been organizing clattered to the floor. That's when I knew. Now, standing in the kitchen where I had built my career and my relationship, I watched it all crumble. "I still love her, Arya," Caleb admitted, finally looking up. His eyes were red-rimmed but determined. "I tried to move on with you, and you're amazing, you truly are. But when I heard she collapsed, that she might die, I realized I never stopped loving her." Joel burst through the swinging doors, his normally composed demeanor shattered. "She's not in a coma, you fool. I just got off the phone with Dr. Ramirez. Penelope Kingston hasn't been admitted to any hospital in the tri-state area." The look on Caleb's face told me everything. Shock, then guilt, then the slow dawn of realization that he'd been manipulated, but had also willingly participated in the deception. "You threw away everything for a lie," Joel continued, his voice breaking. "You broke the heart of the best woman you'll ever know. For what? A manipulative game." That's when Natalie stepped forward, her elegant frame vibrating with fury as she delivered the line that would echo in my nightmares for months. "Stay single if you don't respect love." As the family drama unfolded before me, something inside me shut down. I slowly untied my chef's apron, The same one Caleb had given me on our first anniversary with Chef Aria Harrington, embroidered on it in anticipation of our marriage. I folded it carefully, placed it on the counter and walked out the back door without a word. The evening air hit my face, cool and indifferent to my pain. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I felt something hardening inside me, a resolve crystallizing from the molten ruins of my shattered dreams. They wouldn't see me break. They wouldn't see me beg. And soon they wouldn't see me at all. I walked aimlessly through the darkening streets, the restaurant growing smaller behind me. My apartment wasn't home anymore. It was filled with Caleb's things, our shared dreams, wedding catalogs. I checked into a modest hotel downtown, paid cash and collapsed onto the bed, still wearing my chef's pants and t-shirt that smelled of rosemary and betrayal. Meanwhile, across town, Joel Harrington was about to uncover the full extent of his son's deception. Joel had always prided himself on his connections. In a town like ours, relationships were currency, and Joel had built his restaurant empire on knowing the right people. Dr. Marcus Ramirez happened to be one of those people. The chief of neurology at Memorial Hospital and a regular at Harvest and Hearth for Tuesday night dinners. "Joel, I'm telling you, we have no patient by that name," Dr. Ramirez insisted over the phone. "I've checked with every hospital in the area. Nobody has admitted a Penelope Kingston for any condition, let alone a coma." Joel's grip tightened on his oak desk, the same desk where he drafted the menu for his first restaurant 30 years ago. "Marcus, are you absolutely certain?" "I've been practicing medicine for 25 years, Joel. I think I know how to check hospital records." After hanging up, Joel sat in silence, the weight of what this meant sinking into his bones. His son, his only son, had thrown away a relationship with an exceptional woman for a lie. Or worse, had been complicit in that lie. The morning after I left, Joel called an emergency family meeting at his home. The tension in the living room was thick enough to cut with a knife as Caleb, Natalie, and Kennedy gathered, unaware of the storm about to break. "Dad, what's this about?" Kennedy asked, tucking her legs underneath her on the leather sofa. At 28, Kennedy was the practical one, the business major who helped manage the restaurant's finances while her brother charmed the guests. Joel didn't answer immediately. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch despite it being only 10 a.m. "Caleb, I want you to tell me again about Penelope's condition." Caleb shifted uncomfortably. She's stable but still unresponsive. The doctors aren't sure when she'll wake up." "At which hospital?" "Memorial." "Why are you—" "That's interesting," Joel interrupted, swirling his scotch, "because I spoke with Dr. Ramirez last night. He assures me that not only is Penelope Kingston not a patient at Memorial, but she hasn't been admitted to any hospital in the tri-state area." The color drained from Caleb's face. Kennedy gasped softly. "Would you care to explain why you've destroyed your engagement to an extraordinary woman over a fabricated medical emergency?" "It's not what you think," Caleb stammered. "Then what is it?" Natalie interjected, her voice dangerously calm. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've either been duped like a fool or you're lying to all of us." The truth spilled out in fragments. Penelope had returned to town claiming she'd made a terrible mistake leaving him. When Caleb didn't immediately fall back into her arms, she orchestrated the fake emergency. Yes, Caleb had realized the truth within hours of rushing to her side, but by then old feelings had resurfaced. They'd spent those 2 days in her lake house, rekindling what they'd once had. "And Aria?" Joel demanded. "Did you spare even a thought for her while you were rekindling?" Caleb had the decency to look ashamed. "I didn't plan for any of this to happen. I truly cared for Aria, but with Penelope—" "Stop," Natalie held up her hand. "Don't you dare try to justify this. Love isn't something you discard when something shinier comes along. It's a commitment, a choice you make every day. Mom, you don't understand. Stay single if you don't respect love." Natalie's words cut through the room like a whip. "If this is how you honor commitment, then you have no business making promises to anyone." Kennedy, who had remained silent until now, looked at her brother with disappointment. "Aria deserved better. She worked harder than anyone I know, for this family, for the restaurant, for you." The family confrontation lasted hours. By afternoon, Joel had come to a decision that would alter the family dynamic forever. He called his lawyer from his study while the others waited in tense silence. Richard, I need to make changes to my will and the restaurant ownership structure. Immediately. His voice was flat but determined. The amended documents arrived by courier the next morning. The family gathered once more as Joel outlined the changes. Kennedy would now inherit 75% of the Harrington Restaurant Group, with Caleb receiving only a 25% share, a complete reversal of the previous arrangement. "Dad, you can't be serious," Caleb protested. "The restaurants were supposed to be mine. We've talked about this my whole life. And I always assumed you'd be the man I raised you to be," Joel replied coldly. "Kennedy has shown the judgment and integrity this business requires. You have not." Kennedy looked torn between vindication and sympathy for her brother. "Maybe this is temporary, Dad. Until Caleb." "It's not temporary," Joel cut her off. "Richard has filed the papers. It's done." Throughout the city, people whispered about Aria's sudden absence. Joel found her resignation letter the morning after the confrontation. A single page thanking him for the opportunities, apologizing for the inconvenience, and requesting her final check be mailed to her mother's address in another state. When Joel went to her apartment, the landlord told him she'd terminated her lease and moved out overnight. Her phone number was disconnected. Her social media accounts deactivated. "She's gone," Joel told the family, defeat evident in his voice. "Really gone." A week later, when Caleb finally worked up the courage to go to her mother's home in Michigan, he learned Aria had never arrived. She had vanished as completely as the smoke from a snuffed candle, leaving nothing but the lingering scent of what might have been. And somewhere, in a place none of them would think to look, I was rebuilding myself from the ground up. One recipe, one breath, one day at a time. They would never find me until I wanted to be found. 6 months passed like a slow-cooking reduction, concentrated and intense. My new life in Venice was taking shape, one delicate layer at a time. I'd chosen this floating city for its labyrinthine streets where I could lose myself, for its culinary traditions that both challenged and comforted me, and most importantly, for how utterly unlikely it was that anyone from my former life would think to look for me here. Meanwhile, back in America, the consequences of that fateful night continued to unfold. Caleb's reunion with Penelope had soured within weeks. The thrill of forbidden reconnection quickly gave way to the reality of why they'd broken up in the first place. Her constant need for drama, his inability to fully commit. The Comer ruse had revealed character flaws neither could ignore, and when Penelope suggested another elaborate scheme to win back Joel's approval, Caleb finally saw their relationship for what it was: toxic and manipulative. "I've lost everything that actually mattered," he confessed to Kennedy over drinks at what used to be his favorite bar. "Dad barely speaks to me. The staff at the restaurant look at me like I'm a villain in some soap opera. An aria. God, I didn't realize what I had until..." "Don't," Kennedy cut him off. "You don't get to play the victim here. You made your choices." The restaurant, once his assumed inheritance, now felt like a temporary workspace where he performed tasks but had no real stake. Joel had him managing the books and inventory, grunt work that Kennedy had previously handled, while she was being groomed for leadership. Caleb's once charming smile had faded, replaced by dark circles under his eyes and a perpetual slump to his shoulders. Joel watched his son's downward spiral with a mixture of satisfaction and paternal concern. Justice needed to be served, but watching Caleb's self-destruct brought him no pleasure. More troubling was the void Aria had left, not just in their kitchen but in the family dynamic. She had been the bridge between Joel's old-school culinary traditions and modern innovation, between his gruff exterior and his genuine love for his craft. Late one night after closing, Joel found himself staring at the framed review that had first celebrated Aria's maple-glazed duck. On impulse he picked up the phone. "Redwood Investigations? This is Joel Harrington. I need your best person for a delicate matter." The private investigator, a former police detective named Diana Morrow, listened carefully to Joel's request. "To be clear, you're asking me to locate your former employee, not to interfere with her new life? Just confirmation that she's safe and well?" "That's right," Joel confirmed. "I just need to know she's okay. And if she's in any kind of trouble, well, I'd want to help. She's like family." As Diana began her search, I was settling into my routine at Cucina Americana, a small but ambitious restaurant in Venice's Cannaregio district, far from the tourist crowds. The owner, an Italian-American named Marco Bellucci, had taken a chance on me after tasting my portfolio dish. A risotto that honored Italian tradition while incorporating distinctly American maple and bourbon flavors. "This is not Italian and yet," Marco had said, closing his eyes as he savored the bite, "it speaks the same language as my grandmother's cooking. Authentic but surprising." I'd started as a line cook, despite my executive chef experience. It felt right to earn my place again, to build something new from scratch. My one-bedroom apartment overlooking a quiet canal became my sanctuary. I'd watch the morning light dance on the water, sip espresso from a tiny cup and feel for fleeting moments something like peace. 4 months into my Venetian life, Marco entered the kitchen with news. "There's a culinary competition next month. Regional chefs presenting fusion concepts. I've entered our restaurant." "That's wonderful," I said, continuing to slice fennel with practiced precision. "You will represent us, Aria. Your maple bourbon risotto, your duck with cherry gastrique. This is exactly what they're looking for." I hesitated, the knife pausing mid-slice. Public recognition meant visibility. Visibility meant risk. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of spotlight." Marco's weathered hand covered mine. "The world deserves your talent, Cara. And you deserve to be seen." The competition was held in a restored palazzo overlooking the Grand Canal. Chefs from across northern Italy presented their interpretations of fusion cuisine to a panel of judges and invited guests. I worked in focused silence, the familiar rhythms of cooking centering me as I prepared my signature dish. "Your technique is impressive," said a voice beside me as I plated my final presentation. "American." I looked up to find myself staring into warm hazel eyes. He was tall, with dark hair swept casually to one side and a smile that seemed genuinely curious rather than competitive. "Pie technique or me?" I asked, surprised by my own willingness to engage. "Both, I think," he replied. "I'm Ryan Kingston, guest judge and general culinary enthusiast." The surname registered no connection in my mind. Kingston was common enough, and I'd locked away memories of my previous life so thoroughly that Penelope's last name was buried deep in that vault. "Aria Mitchell," I replied, using my mother's maiden name. "And yes, American techniques with Italian soul." Ryan tasted my dish officially during the judging round, his expression thoughtful as he savored each element. Later, as I accepted the second-place medal, a victory for an outsider in Italy, he sought me out again. "Your food tells a story," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Mind sharing what inspired the bourbon notes in the risotto?" Something about his direct gaze and unassuming manner disarmed me. We talked for hours at a cafe afterward about food philosophy, culinary memories, and the intimate connection between emotion and flavor. Not once did he mention his wealth or status, though I would later learn he owned one of Italy's most successful food import companies. Our first date wasn't planned as such. He invited me to a small producer's market to taste rare olive oils, and the day somehow extended into evening. Our second date was at my suggestion, teaching him to make proper biscuits and gravy in my tiny apartment kitchen, both of us laughing as flour dusted every surface. For the first time since leaving America, I felt the tight bands around my heart loosening. Ryan valued authenticity, in food and in life. His passion matched my own and his respect for my boundaries never wavered. When I deflected questions about my past, he focused on my present and future instead. "Whatever brought you to Venice," he said one evening as we walked along a moonlit canal, "I'm selfishly grateful for it." I couldn't have known then how our separate pasts were connected by invisible threads, or how those threads would eventually pull tight, drawing together lives once thought forever separated by betrayal and ocean waters. 8 months into my relationship with Ryan, I had almost forgotten what it felt like to look over my shoulder. The woman who stared back at me from Venice's countless reflective surfaces was someone new. Executive chef Aria Mitchell of Cucina Americana, recently featured in European culinary magazines, half of a couple that local restaurateurs referred to as perfect pairing. My life had transformed from the ashes of betrayal into something unexpectedly beautiful. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Diana Morrow sat across from Joel in his office, sliding a manila folder across his mahogany desk. "I found her," she said simply. It took longer than expected. She was careful about covering her tracks. Joel hesitated before opening the folder, as if afraid of what he might find. Is she all right? Diana's expression softened. More than all right. She's thriving. The folder contained photos of me in Chef White's outside a charming restaurant, receiving an award at a regional competition, and walking hand in hand with a tall, dark-haired man along a Venetian canal. My smile in the photographs was genuine, something Joel hadn't seen in the final weeks before I'd left. Venice, Joel murmured, studying the images. Of all places. She's built quite a reputation there, Diana continued. Executive chef position, culinary awards, mentions in European food publications. Joel nodded slowly, feeling a complex mixture of pride and loss. Thank you, Diana. That's all I needed to know. But fate had other plans. That same evening, Joel received a call from an Italian business associate seeking American distribution for a specialty food product line. The associate mentioned the upcoming wedding of his friend's son, Ryan Kingston. Perhaps you've heard of Kingston Imports? A magnificent ceremony planned at the Cathedral of San Marco next month. Joel might have thought nothing of it except for the timing, and the nagging feeling that he'd heard the Kingston name before. When he mentioned it casually to Caleb the next day, his son's face drained of color. Kingston? As in Penelope Kingston. Within hours, what had been intended as merely confirmation of my well-being transformed into airline reservations and hotel bookings. Joel convinced himself that they should attend to offer congratulations in person. A thin justification that barely concealed his deeper motives. Natalie and Kennedy agreed to come, partly out of curiosity, partly to keep Joel and Caleb from making a scene. Caleb was the most reluctant. This is insane, he protested as they packed. We can't just crash her life after all this time. What if she doesn't want to see us? Then we'll respect that and leave, Joel answered firmly. But I need to know she's truly happy. I need closure. What none of them knew was that 2 nights before their flight departed, Ryan had taken me to Cucina Americana after hours. The restaurant was transformed, candles glowing on every surface, white roses and sprigs of rosemary adorning the tables. What's all this? I asked, taking in the romantic scene. Ryan guided me to the center of the room where we'd first met during that culinary competition. He took both my hands in his. This is where I first tasted your risotto and knew I was in trouble, he said with a tender smile. Because I realized food could make me feel things I'd never felt before. And then I got to know the chef behind the food. He dropped to one knee, producing a vintage ring box. Inside was not the ostentatious diamond I might have expected from a man of his wealth, but a delicate emerald surrounded by tiny pearls, elegant, unique, and perfectly suited to my taste. Aria Mitchell, you've transformed not just flavor profiles but my entire life. Will you marry me? Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, yes. The wedding preparations moved quickly. Ryan's family had connections throughout Venice, opening doors to venues that would normally be booked years in advance. When he suggested the historic Cathedral of San Marco, I hesitated, remembering my abandoned wedding plans back home. But the grandeur and history of the cathedral felt right somehow, as if getting married in such a timeless place might bless our union with permanence. I never asked about Ryan's family beyond his parents, and he never pressed me about mine. We both carried our private histories, content to build our future without dwelling on the past. When he mentioned having a sister who was complicated, I nodded in understanding without requesting details. When I explained that my parents had passed years ago and I had no family to invite, he simply held me closer. The morning of our wedding dawned with that peculiar Venetian light that painters have tried to capture for centuries, golden, shimmering, almost otherworldly. As I prepared in a private room of the cathedral, fitting the final touches on my sleek, modern gown, I felt a strange sense of completion. The woman who had fled in the night, broken and nameless, was now walking confidently toward a future of her own choosing. Outside the cathedral, tourists mingled with arriving guests, many unaware that a wedding was about to take place. Among them stood 4 Americans, jet-lagged but determined, consulting a map of Venice. This is it, Joel confirmed, looking up at the magnificent facade. Cathedral of San Marco. We should wait until after the ceremony, Kennedy suggested sensibly. Approach her at the reception, somewhere private. But Caleb wasn't listening. His attention had been caught by a familiar face in the crowd, a woman with perfectly highlighted hair and designer sunglasses, looking impatient as she checked her watch repeatedly. "Penelope?" he called out before he could stop himself. She whirled around, her surprise quickly masked by a practiced smile. "Caleb, what on earth are you doing in Venice?" "We could ask you the same thing," Natalie replied coolly. Penelope removed her sunglasses with a flourish. "My brother's getting married today. I'm here as family obviously, though I barely know the bride. Some chef he met at a competition. Ryan always did have unusual taste." The pieces clicked together in Joel's mind with horrifying clarity. "This Ryan, he's your brother? And he's marrying a chef?" "Yes," Penelope answered, oblivious to the tension suddenly radiating from the group. "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. I should really get inside." "What's the bride's name?" Caleb interrupted, his voice hoarse. Penelope shrugged. "Aria something. Mitchell, I think. Ryan's kept her pretty separate from the family, to be honest. They've only been together about a year." The color drained from 4 faces simultaneously as the cathedral bells began to toll, announcing the imminent ceremony. Without another word, they moved as one toward the massive doors, drawn by an invisible force stronger than propriety or reason. Inside, I stood just out of sight, clutching my bouquet of white roses and lavender, waiting for my cue. The cathedral's magnificent arches soared overhead, its ancient stones witness to countless vows over the centuries. As the music swelled, I took my first step forward, ready to begin the walk that would lead me to Ryan and our future. And then I saw them, 4 figures frozen in the middle of the aisle, staring at me with expressions of absolute shock. The past and present collided with the force of tectonic plates meeting, and I stopped dead in my tracks, my world shifting beneath my feet once more. Time seemed to stand still in the cathedral's vast space. The organist continued playing, unaware of the drama unfolding. The guests murmured in confusion. Ryan turned from the altar, concern etched across his face as he saw me frozen midway down the aisle. I had imagined this moment in nightmares, facing Caleb again, but never like this, never here. My fingers tightened around my bouquet until my knuckles turned white. Then with a deep breath I did what I had trained myself to do in the most chaotic of kitchens. I focused. Meeting Ryan's questioning gaze, I gave him a slight nod and continued my walk, chin high, moving with deliberate grace past the 4 stunned figures without acknowledging their presence. This was my day, my choice, my future. I would not let the past derail me again. The ceremony proceeded in a dreamlike haze. I spoke my vows clearly, the words echoing through the ancient cathedral. When Ryan kissed me as his wife, the applause of our guests momentarily drowned out the pounding of my heart. Only as we turned to face the congregation did I allow myself to scan the crowd again. They had moved to the back, watching in silent shock. As we exited through the side door for the traditional private moment before joining the reception, Ryan squeezed my hand. "Who are those people who upset you?" "The Americans in the middle aisle." Before I could answer, the cathedral's side chamber door opened and Joel stepped in, followed by Natalie, Kennedy, and a visibly uncomfortable Caleb. "I apologize for the intrusion," Joel began formally, his eyes never leaving my face. "But we need to speak with Aria." Ryan moved protectively to my side. "I don't know who you are, but this is hardly the time or place." "It's all right," I said softly, placing my hand on Ryan's arm. The trembling I had felt earlier was gone. In its place was a strange calm, like the eye of a storm. "Ryan, these are people from my past. Joel Harrington, my former employer. His wife Natalie, daughter Kennedy, and..." I paused, meeting Caleb's gaze directly for the first time. "His son Caleb, who was once my fiancé." Ryan's expression shifted from confusion to understanding, then to wariness. "Your fiancé? The one who..." "Yes," I interrupted gently. "And now apparently your brother-in-law." The door burst open again as Penelope rushed in, her face flushed with anger. "Ryan, what is happening? Why did you marry her? Did you know who she is?" Ryan stared at his sister. "What are you talking about?" "She was Caleb's fiancée. The chef from his father's restaurant that he left for me." Penelope pointed at me accusingly. "Did you do this on purpose? Is this some kind of revenge?" The small chamber filled with a tense silence as everyone absorbed the tangled web of connections. I stepped forward, my wedding gown rustling softly against the ancient stone floor. "I had no idea Ryan was your brother, Penelope," I said evenly. Just as I'm certain he had no idea about my history with Caleb. Ryan's grip on my hand tightened. I didn't. But it wouldn't have changed anything if I had known. Caleb stepped forward, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. Arya, I don't know what to say. When we found out where you were, that you were getting married, we never imagined that I would be marrying the brother of the woman you left me for? I finished for him, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. Life has a strange way of coming full circle. Joel cleared his throat. We didn't come to cause trouble, Arya. When Diana, our investigator, found you, I just wanted to know you were okay. You disappeared so completely. I needed to, I replied simply. I needed to rebuild my life without any reminders of what happened. Kennedy approached cautiously. You've done amazingly well. We've read about your success here. A knot formed in my throat at her kind words. Of all the Harringtons, Kennedy had always been the most straightforward, the least complicated in her affections. Thank you, I managed. Natalie stepped forward next, elegant as ever, studying my face. You look happy, Arya. Truly happy. I am, I confirmed, meeting her gaze. Ryan sees me for who I am. He values what I value. The meaning behind my words wasn't lost on anyone. Caleb flinched visibly. Penelope scoffed, but Ryan pulled me closer, dropping a protective kiss on my temple. I'd like to understand, Ryan said quietly. The full story. From everyone. And so, in that small chamber of a grand cathedral in Venice on my wedding day, the tangled past unraveled. Caleb explained his weakness, his mistake in believing he still loved Penelope. Penelope reluctantly admitted to orchestrating the fake medical emergency that had been the catalyst for our broken engagement. Joel spoke of his disappointment, the changed will, the search to find me. And I shared my journey, the night I fled, the rebuilding of my career, and the chance meeting with Ryan that had led us here. When the full story emerged, Ryan turned to Penelope with newfound understanding. You manipulated Caleb, destroyed his engagement, and now you're angry that he's married to someone who makes him happy? This stops now, Penelope. No more games. Penelope opened her mouth to protest, but something in Ryan's expression made her reconsider. She left the chamber without another word, the click of her heels echoing against the stone. Joel approached me hesitantly. Arya, I can't undo what my son did, but I want you to know how proud I am of what you've accomplished. Your talent always deserved recognition. Thank you, Joel, I said sincerely. Your belief in me gave me the foundation to start over. When we finally emerged to join our reception, the strange intersection of past and present had shifted something fundamental. The weight I had carried for so long had lifted. Ryan and I celebrated with our guests, including the Harringtons, who kept a respectful distance but whose presence somehow completed a circle that needed closing. 6 months later, I invited them all, Joel, Natalie, Kennedy, Caleb, even Penelope, to a private dinner at Cucina Americana. Ryan stood beside me as I served each course, each dish telling part of my journey. The maple-glazed duck that had first earned Joel's respect, the risotto that had introduced me to Ryan, and for dessert, a new creation. A bitter chocolate tart with sweet cherry compote and delicate spun sugar. The bitter and the sweet, I explained as I presented the final course. Both necessary parts of a complete experience. As we dined together in a room that had once witnessed Ryan's proposal, the conversation flowed more easily than any of us might have expected. Caleb spoke of his new position managing a small farm-to-table restaurant, starting from scratch, earning respect rather than inheriting it. Penelope mentioned her therapy sessions, a hint of genuine self-awareness in her voice. Kennedy shared news of her pregnancy, the continuation of the Harrington legacy. And in that moment, watching these formerly fractured lives finding their separate paths toward healing, I realized that sometimes justice isn't about punishment or revenge. Sometimes it's about growth, forgiveness, and the grace to let your own happiness be your greatest triumph. If Arya's journey from heartbreak to triumph moved you, please hit subscribe to support our channel. Every subscription helps us share more stories of people who found happiness as their ultimate revenge. Thank you for being part of our storytelling family.